In this 2-hour Entitled Parent special, I'll be showing you the top 10 most upvoted Entitled Parent stories of the past month. Here we go. When someone tried to get you fired, but you have a reverse card. This incident blew up in March 2021, in the middle of lockdowns and stuff. It would probably be recognizable to people I work with. Hopefully they don't read this thread. It's a story about someone whose ambition was bigger than their ethics and the law, and it coming back to bite them. At the time, I was working as a manager in a mid-sized business. While I was there, I was assigned a new member to my team. I'll call her Evil. Now, Evil was in her mid-20s and was pretty fresh out of college. She was the kind of person who could talk your ear off about all of her ideas and plans and what she was working on, but she never really seemed to have anything to show for it. When I talked to her about clients complaining that she wasn't getting back to them, she would always have an excuse about how difficult they were, how snowed under she was, and how she'd written an email but it must have gotten lost in spam, so on and so forth. Basically, never her faults. It got to the point where after one of our monthly meetings, I called her in and explained that if she couldn't get her task done, she needed to let us know so we could help delegate resources to make sure things weren't slipping through the cracks. I'll admit, I was pretty direct. Her performance was impacting the whole team, and my job was literally to keep the team on track. I get that people can be under pressure, there can be stuff going on at home which impacts work, and that sometimes people need a bit of help. But if every time I ask about a project, you say, yep, everything's good, I've got it under control, and then it all falls apart, and your only response is to blame the client, we've got a problem. I explained that I wasn't going to start formal performance management or anything like that, but from now on, I'd like her to check in with me on Monday mornings for 10 minutes to go over objectives for the week and to check if she needed support with any of her clients. I know it isn't fun to be micromanaged, so I try to keep these check-ins short and mostly just offer assistance on stuff. She clearly hated my guts though, and apparently was hatching her own ProRevenge. Now, part of my role included use of a purchasing card, which wasn't in my name, but I had access to it. I was given the card to basically make small purchases for the office or spend up to $500 on clients. The card was kept in an office I shared with another team manager where we could both access it when we needed it. One day, I get a call from accounts asking about a few abnormal purchases on the card. A Photoshop subscription, a couple of Uber Eats orders, an HBO subscription, etc. I say I don't know anything about them and they should check with the other team manager. Apparently, the other team manager didn't know anything about them either because after the weekend, I get called into the big boss's office. After my colleague and I had denied involvement, accounts had started calling Adobe and Uber and stuff to find out where the transactions were coming from. They said that not only were the accounts in my name, they were registered to an email address with my name in it too. For example, op@domain.com or something like that. I can't describe what it felt like to be in that meeting. I felt physically sick. I couldn't work out what was happening. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was about to get fired and I couldn't understand how that was even possible. The director was going on about how access to the card was a privilege and that I'd signed an agreement about appropriate use and so on and so forth. I denied that I'd been using it inappropriately, and the boss listened, but I could tell he wasn't that convinced. To be honest, in my head, I was gaslighting myself and worrying that I'd somehow saved the card in Google and maybe my wife had been accidentally using it or something. It was terrible, and I found myself apologizing and saying, I don't know how this happened. I assure you that I know that none of those expenses are appropriate uses of company funds. There must have been some kind of mistake. Can I please have the details and I'll look into it, etc, etc. When I finally got out of that office, job still intact, barely, Evil was waiting for me at my office door. She was grinning from ear to ear, and she sweetly explained that she'd been waiting for our morning meeting. I told her something had come up and we'd do the meeting tomorrow, and she said, "Oh, will you be in tomorrow?" Now, confused, because I didn't know I was in a ProRevenge thread at the time, I just replied, "Yeah, why would I not be in tomorrow?" And she just sipped her tea and said, "Oh, no reason," turned around and went back to her desk. Something felt off, but I was still worrying about what had happened with the boss, so I spent the next couple of hours calling my wife, calling Adobe, and doing the same legwork that accounts had done. It became very obvious that someone had been using my name and the company card to spend a bunch of money online. Had I been hacked or something? Well, personal info on the dark web, and these hackers just really wanted Photoshop and Wendy's delivered. It was the Uber Eats that was evil's undoing. After getting on the phone and talking through what had gone on, and obviously giving my name for the account and everything, the fellow on the phone told me where the food had been delivered. It was in our city, which made me rule out straight away any notion of my data being sold online or something. Now I was suspicious and angry. I don't like to think the worst of people, but now I was. Listening to my gut, I pulled up Evil's employee information and checked her address. I pulled it up on Google Maps, dropped a pin on her place, and then looked for the address Uber Eats had given me. It was the corner of her effing block. I was furious. When she left work for the day, I got IT to give me access to her laptop. Sure enough, when I opened up her domain.com account, under her listed accounts was op@domain.com, the same email that had been used for the Uber order. There were some things that she had been smart about. The IP address she'd been using was the office, which would have tied back to me. She'd even had the food delivered to a different address. She'd even made a fake email address. But saving her passwords on a work computer was a mistake. I called the boss that night and explained what I'd found, and kept the IT guy with me to support the fact that I hadn't just logged into her computer and made it all up. The next day, the boss called her into the office and fired her so bad there were red trucks lining up outside the building. When she, teary-eyed, left his office, I made sure I was standing in the hall sipping a cup of tea. It had gotten cold while I waited for her, but look, it still tasted sweet. I hope she went home that night, because if she did, she would have received some nice Goodbye Wendy's delivered by Uber Eats, paid for on my personal card, of course. That is brilliant. Revenge and justice can be the same thing, right? In the end, she was fired. The boss apologized, and we were on good terms when I left in October for a new gig. Now she, Evil, never apologized, and I've not seen her since. The boss decided not to get police involved, and neither did I. I just didn't want the hassle. Wow, guys, I've got to say, on behalf of Evil, good effort. You were so close. Yeah, horrible thing to do, but you have to praise her, you know. She was very, very close to getting this worker fired. It was almost perfect. I do think that ordering the food to the corner of your house is a bit stupid. I mean, look, come on. You might as well order it to your house at that point. At least do it a few streets away or something and then drive and go and get it. The corner of your building? Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Not to mention being logged in on the Uber Eats account on your work laptop. Yeah, pretty dumb. And the email as well. I like the fact that you made the email in the first place in OP's name. But yeah, leaving yourself logged in, not the smartest idea. It's actually pretty cool. I think this might be the first ProRevenge story that I've read, which was written by the victim. Like, OP didn't realize that they were on the receiving end. And it's amazing as well that they just used the exact same revenge in reverse to get their revenge. Do you get what I'm saying? Very, very clever. I really enjoyed this story. Imagine, guys, being Evil, going home, knowing you're fired, and then from out of nowhere, an Uber Eats order arrives, and you know exactly who it's from, and the pain in that Wendy's burger. It's just too much to take. Probably a nice burger, though. Who knows? Now, moving on to our next story. Now, this one actually comes from r/nuclearrevenge, so you know it's going to be a little bit more serious than the first. Miss Nice Girl has left the building. First, I need to explain something. I seem like a very nice, laid-back, easygoing person, so most people make the mistake of thinking I'm a spineless wimp they can take advantage of. Operative word there is seem. In point of fact, I have a vicious, vindictive temper. I'm just emotionally lazy. I don't like wasting time and energy on confrontation that can more profitably be spent elsewhere. However, if you mess with my family or my money, very bad things will happen to you. As my mum liked to say, Miss Nice Fancy has left the building and you don't want to meet the other fancy. Example follows. This happened about 20 years ago. I started working as a CAD drafter for a small drafting and design firm, practically fresh out of college. I made a good salary, not great, but comfortable. Very soon, I found myself the drafter, receptionist, office manager, file clerk, and even janitor when I needed to pick up a little extra money. My boss was almost never in the office because I was there to handle everything. After a year of being general factotum, on Friday the 13th of April, my boss comes to me and tells me he doesn't have my income tax paperwork ready, but has a reasonable excuse, and he asked me to file an extension. I told him, this is kind of last minute, don't you think? But okay, I'll do it. And I did. Every couple of weeks afterwards, I'd ask him about my tax paperwork, and he'd tell me, no, not yet. and umpteen excuses why not. Finally, he told me his lawyer had them and was finishing preparing them and would be ready any day. Really? I did wonder why his lawyer was working on them instead of his accountant, but I didn't say anything. My tax extension would be up on Sunday, July 15th, so I had to turn my taxes in by Saturday, July 14th. On Friday, July 13th, at about 5 PM, I was sitting in my office chatting with my mum, who was there to give me a ride home. My boss came into the office and had the gall to ask me to file another tax extension and gave me some totally bogus excuse. You see, what he didn't know was I'd found all my tax paperwork on his computer a few weeks before. It just needed to be printed out and signed off. So I knew then that he'd been lying his butt off the whole time. I remember staring at him for a few moments, absolutely dumbfounded, then smiling and saying, okay. My mum told me afterwards, when she saw me smile at him like that she thought, oh snap, my daughter's gonna kill this guy and I don't know if I can stop her. I'm sure he wishes that that's all I'd done to him. First thing Monday morning, I walked straight up to my boss and dropped my resignation on his desk. He's like, what the heck? And tried to argue. But I don't argue. I just tell him, I'm leaving. Do you want me to work my notice? He said, heck no, get your stuff and get out. Which was another huge mistake in a long line of them. Because I left and went straight to the IRS office, where I gave up all the goods on this guy. He apparently never actually paid any of my taxes or his, though he did take it out of my pay and I had proof. It so happens, before he was a CAD drafter, designer, he was a CPA who left that field under a cloud. The IRS was not happy to hear his name again. Everybody knows you do not mess with the IRS. Not content with that, I then contacted all of his business associates and told them what he'd done, that he was being investigated by the IRS, and if they didn't want to be too, they might want to steer clear. I didn't tell his wife, whom I was on very good terms with, but only because I wanted him to have that pleasure. Just picture that conversation. Oh my god, why did she leave? She did everything. Well, I'm very sure she heard all about it from his associates. I will give him this. He was stubborn. He managed to hang on to his business for about a year of living hell before going under. But I smirked every time I went by his empty office. Wait, so you're telling me, OP, that your boss was filing tax returns for you, taking the money, but then not actually paying the tax? Does it get much worse than that? I mean, come on, what a little scammer. Disgrace of a man. IRS, I hope you absolutely pound that man. No, not in that way, you sickos. Or maybe, who knows, maybe he deserves it. You know what is actually very worrying is that this man probably has done the same to many other people as well. And it was OP's, hard work that got him finally caught and has ruined his business. But I just feel bad for all the other people that this has definitely happened to. Let's be realistic. Imagine how many years this guy's been doing this. Messing with someone's money is probably one of the worst things you can do. After family, that is. Like, come on. That's terrible. He infringed my art. I shut down his print shop and ruined his career. A little backstory. I'm an online artist, and this took place when I was in my early 20s. There was a popular artist who calls himself a professional and works in the industries. I used to look up to him. Let's call him Zach. Lately, I noticed how Zach's art looked eerily too familiar to a piece of media I've seen before. So I looked up the images and found it too matched up to his art. He was directly referencing official art and profiting off of it by selling it on his print shops online. He didn't even make any effort to make the reference detached from the original piece. I confronted him about it, sending a detailed message not to do that and the possible consequences. I've seen artists in real life who've been sued for over $100,000 and to the extent of going to jail for doing what he did. Instead of being professional and mature about it, Zach lashed out at me and took it to social media, telling me how wrong I was to falsely accuse him, since artists use references, and how I could get sued for libel. I was dumbfounded at how clueless he was, not comprehending what I was talking about. In his social media post, he included my username for my blog, which had links to my contacts, my emails, Facebook page, art accounts, and Instagram. His fans, including his group of friends, joined in, sending me downright horrific messages. I had panic attacks resulting from the pure backlash of his enormous fan base. I constantly received hate mail, telling me how horrible I was as a person, how trashy my art was, and to the extent of death threats for almost an entire month. The straw that broke the camel's back was when he directly referenced my art and made money off it. I didn't know how to find a lawyer, and I felt hopeless and angry that I couldn't do anything about it. Later it hit me though, that if I can't do anything, then maybe another artist could, or anyone that holds the copyrights. The last time I remember, Zach never credits any of these artists for his references. I looked into the art he referenced and examined each official company matching Zach's art. I used Google search to find anyone working for said company, and voila! I found a staff member for a branch in a different continent. Let's call him Cody. I contacted Cody's Facebook and tipped him about Zach's activity through Messenger. I uploaded and sent a copy of their art and Zach's art for comparison. Cody just simply replied, "We'll contact our legal team. Thanks for the notice." Another week passes by, and during that time, Zach constantly comments on every dang thing I post about on my art blog. And then, silence. I checked his print shop and it was removed. His response to my message was taken down from his social media. He stopped talking to his friends publicly. Days later, a fan was asking about him, and one of his friends responded that he's no longer friends because he is a toxic hypocrite. One of his former group of friends contacted my friend and cried about how awful a bully he was. Of course, my friend didn't care. It was the most glorifying feeling I've ever had. This would have been avoided if he'd at least heeded my warnings, but how he handled the situation was not professional at all. Now, roughly 5 years later, I was informed that apparently Zach had a tough time getting back into the industry after allegations of his past copyright infringements. The biggest one was having a lawsuit with the company Cody worked for. Now listen here guys, as you can probably tell by my face, I'm not an artist. Doesn't make any sense. Now listen here guys, as you can probably tell by my monochrome walls, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm not that big into art, but I do know that copywriting and using someone else's art and selling it on without their consent is one of the worst things you can possibly do. Zach knows it, and that's why he's getting defensive and abusing you online. I mean seriously, getting people to send you death threats when you know you're in the wrong, I don't think it gets much worse than that. That's embarrassing. I've got to say, for OP, well done on doing something that others may not have been brave enough to do, or just realizing that something was happening that others may not have realized was going on. It's a pretty terrible thing, taking someone else's work and using it and selling it as your own. Yeah, Zach's career deserved to go down the drain. Sorry, but it's true. Now for our second story of revenge. Didn't go above and beyond. I'll delete everything that was above and beyond. The original owner of the business I worked for was amazing. I'll call him Larry. He cared about every employee and realized how much we helped the company with our respective positions. He'd even let me go negative on my sick time once when I was hospitalized for a week following a double pulmonary embolism with the agreement that I would work the time back. And I did. Just painting a picture of how wonderful Larry was as our boss. Larry finally retired after 45 years of running the business and sold it to his son, who I'll call Eric. Most people know how bad an idea that is, but Larry thought his son could handle it. He couldn't at first, but that's another story. Eric thought I wasn't doing enough during working hours, an office job dealing with inventory coming into a retail store. But what he failed to realize was that, since I worked up there for 6 years and got familiar with the work, I was really efficient at the job. So much so that I'd collected more responsibilities each year. Larry was one of the main people pushing for me to take on more each year, with immediate raises every time something was added. Eric didn't have the same mentality. Eric fired me for being inactive for too long during the day. And another reason which isn't important here. That's also another story for another time. So I was really active for my last 3 days, with deleting everything I'd created for the company. It was all above and beyond work, so since I didn't ever go above and beyond, they didn't deserve to keep it. It was science for products, pictures gathered for advertising, vendor contact information, a program I designed to keep organized and on time for invoices, and a manual I typed up on how to do my job. They had an old version of my job instructions, but by that time they were practically obsolete, especially with all my extra duties collected over the years. In the 2 years I've been gone, they've had at least 8 people hire for my position who quit within a couple of months. I keep getting updates every few months from one of my friends in that office. I will personally never understand this mentality from a boss. If you've got a worker that is excellent at their job and is able to do more stuff in a shorter period of time, why would you punish them for that? What you're actually telling people to do by saying this is work slower and work less efficiently, do less stuff, and then I won't fire you. Like, it's really odd. If I've got an employee that's working at 100% capacity and they're doing great and they get all their work done in 6 hours, why would I want them to work slower and it take them 8 hours? I'd rather give them more stuff to do in those other 2 hours. That's what Larry was doing. That's what Eric hasn't been able to do. It's very strange. Punishing someone for being too good at their job. That is a weird mentality. Now moving on to our third story of revenge. This one actually comes from r/nuclearrevenge, so you know it's going to be extra juicy. Try to strong arm a victim illegally, we'll see about that. This happened back in 2010 when I lived in Winter Garden, Florida, with my husband and his dying uncle. Quick background. My husband and I moved in with his sick uncle after losing so much during the 2008 housing market crash in the US, like many of my husband's lawn maintenance customers. We also moved in with his uncle into a condo because his uncle had stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver, and his self-entitled sister and her family refused to help take care of him. My husband, a retired Seminole County Sheriff's officer, which is important for later, and I got ourselves set in the condo's 2 bedrooms, as his uncle had himself set up in the living room, including the bed. On the first day, we found dangerous black mold caused by a leaky dishwasher. On the second day, we found the master shower had loose tiles and a leaky shower head. On the third day, we found a nest of brown recluse spiders in the living room. We talked with his uncle about these problems and found out that the landlord, who we will call Slumlord, who is friends with my husband's self-entitled sister, aunts, and her family, was refusing to take care of the issues as required by law. We wanted to start legal actions then, but my husband's uncle talked us out of it several times. The slumlord was nice to us so long as my husband's sick uncle was alive. The very next day after my husband's uncle died was a completely different story. The slumlord turned nasty, aggressive, and began to try and strong-arm evict us like we were nothing more than drug addict squatters. The slumlord even bowed up and aggressively tried to fight my husband when we dropped off our next rent check. He kept telling us that we had to move or else, yet refused to follow actual Florida laws to evict us. The slumlord and his corrupt Winter Garden PD code enforcement officer wife even recruited my husband's self-entitled aunt and uncle to start harassing us about, just move, even if you have to live in a tent. My husband's self-entitled aunt would say to me, "Why don't you and my nephew just move so they can rent the condo to another senior?" My husband replied, "We don't have anywhere else to go yet, and our landlord must go through eviction laws or get into very serious trouble." "But you're nothing but trouble, officer nephew. You've been problems since the day you were born. Get out of their condo and stop being a problem for everyone. Who cares if you have to live in a tent?" All of this made my retired officer husband, who specialized in uncovering corrupted law enforcement, very suspicious. We talked and began investigating the slumlord and his corrupt code enforcement wife. My first order was to place all rent into escrow with evidence of repairs that had been neglected. Second, I sent a notification of cease and desist of harassment to the slumlord and the self-entitled aunt. Next, I researched public property tax records. Woohoo! Pay dirt there. The slumlord's condo wasn't registered as a rental property within the state of Florida, and he was paying far less in property taxes than he should have been. Property tax records also showed that he didn't own the condo. It was still deeded to his mother, who I found out had been living in a retirement home for 5 years before my husband's uncle moved in. My husband found out that the corrupt code enforcement wife had been inspecting and signing off on hers and slumlord's properties, including the condo, which is against Florida code enforcement conduct laws. I found out from my neighbors in the condo that the slumlord had only been renting to seniors with severe health issues. My best discovery, though, next to tax evasion, was finding out that the Condo Owners Association had a very strict no renting or leasing policy, meaning you or family had to live in the condo and it could not be rented. So, the revenge. Now that we had all of our evidence, my husband and I began to knock down all of the slumlord's dominoes. My husband went and filed a complaint with the Winter Garden Police Department about the corrupt code enforcement wife and her perjury inspections on her family properties. Now, my husband has a glowing record in Seminole County and with the FDLE for having over 200 clean arrests and taking down nearly 60 corrupt public officials, including Child Protective Services, in the early 2000s. This background helped push WGPD to open an investigation into the corrupt code enforcement wife. they discovered that not only had she perjured inspections on her family's properties, but also on my husband's self-entitled aunt and uncle's property as well. This got the wife fired, stripped of her state enforcement officer's license, and convicted of multiple crimes. I sent all property tax fraud evidence to the FL's property tax division. That got the state to investigate the slumlord. The state found that not only did he commit property tax fraud on the condo, but also on a property that he was renting to his son and self-entitled aunt's son, along with business tax fraud and income tax fraud. Both the slumlord's son and self-entitled aunt's son were also busted for possession of illegal narcotics with intent to sell when investigators came to the rental house they lived in. I never expected that much fraud to be found from all of this, but I'm glad it happened. The business tax fraud of slumlord affected self-entitled aunt and self-entitled uncle as well, since they were his business partners. My husband's self-entitled uncle then came under investigation by the USPS board, as he was the postmaster of Winter Garden. The uncle lost his comfy job and pension after it was discovered how he was assisting slumlord in the tax fraud scam and for stealing money orders. All four were convicted of multiple white-collar crimes. They had to sell their properties and most of their stuff and serve some form of time, and also pay huge amounts of fines and restitution. The slumlord, his wife, my hubby's self-entitled aunt, and my hubby's self-entitled uncle, along with their sons, all went down for multiple crimes, both felonies and misdemeanors, all because they thought they could strong-arm evict us. It just proves how smart we tenants can really be when pushed, and it also proves why everyone should know all rental laws and how to research public records, because it can save you in the end. Yeah, I guess that's the overriding point, isn't it? If these people, if OP and her husband, didn't know these laws, then look, nothing would have happened. They probably would have been evicted. Yeah, they might have put up some sort of fuss, but in their own head, put yourselves in their position, they may well have thought, oh, well, he's got the power to do this. But no, they knew their rights, they knew the laws, they investigated, they did their due diligence, and they had this come out as a result. Amazing stuff. The great thing is they're not only helping themselves here, obviously in this situation, but no doubt all these entitled people in the story, all these corrupt people would probably have just kept on doing this, right? For the rest of their life. Who knows how many other people, how many families who are renting may well have been affected by corrupt people like this. So yeah, OP, your husband, good lads. I appreciate what you do. Love it. Dealing with the locker thief in high school. This was back in the early 2000s, probably 2003-04 school year. Throughout the entire year, there was a crime wave of people having things stolen out of their locked lockers. Not everyone, but enough that everyone knew someone it happened to. The school's only defense about this was that it was our fault for sharing locker combos with our friends. They also charged us every time we had to get the combination changed on a locker, like after a theft for instance, because it was assumed to be our fault. Well, I had my graphing calculator taken out of my locker. I also never gave out my combination to anyone, mostly because my friends were idiots and we pulled stuff on each other like that all the time. So, I was out $150 for the calculator and another $150 to change the combination, getting a locksmith out to change the lock. Remember, this is 2003 money, so it's a bit more than that now. To anyone who's ever had to buy a TI-86 in 2003 or 2004, you'll know how much the things cost. I assume that's the graph calculator. Well, my dad was drinking buddies with one of the county detectives. I'll call him Detective Buddy or Uncle Buddy. He went in to talk to the school about the string of thefts going on so that he could get the security camera for the day my calculator went missing, and got completely brushed off as it was a non-existent problem and he must have given out his locker combination. The principal told him he would need a warrant to get the camera footage. Then, when he got the warrant, the school fought the warrant in court, citing student privacy. Cue the ProRevenge. Detective Buddy shows up at our house with a laptop in a laptop bag. He's like, throw this in your locker and tell everyone you know about your brand new laptop. Okay, sure, Uncle Buddy. I see where this is going. 3 days later, I show up at my locker between classes and the laptop is gone. The bag too, nowhere to be seen, as is a 24-ounce bottle of Coke and possibly some pens. I take my phone out and text them that the laptop has been taken. Stand by for the trash show. Oh, and you reported the theft to the police, FYI. He replies back. Okay, I reply, confused. I go about the rest of the day and I don't hear anything back. The following morning, Detective Buddy comes to school with 3 uniformed officers and pull a student Dave out of class, as well as his mum, who works in the front office. The principal is fuming. I don't actually hear the cops, but the principal is annoyed to no end that he had the audacity to accuse them of theft and he couldn't just take them out of his school, etc, etc. Well, turns out there was a tracker in the laptop bag, and Uncle Buddy got a warrant to search a particular house. The laptop had a value of over $1,000, making it a felony. The next afternoon, he set up a tent with a table just outside of the school grounds. He also had a banner across the top: if you've ever had anything stolen from your locker, come and see me. By the next morning, Dave and his mum made the paper. Apparently, Dave allegedly used his mum's login information to get onto the school network and get the locker combinations for basically everyone. Then he'd just open random lockers looking for valuables to steal if he didn't get info of a specific locker to steal from. When the detective set up the stand to get more people reporting thefts, he racked up an astounding number of charges. Each locker counted as a separate misdemeanor unless the stolen object was worth more than $1,000, in which case it was a felony. In less than a week, Uncle Buddy opened and broke an investigation, and they charged Dave and his mum with 9 felonies and 35 misdemeanor charges. When I finally got the story from Buddy, he explained what the situation was. Can I just do some quick maths here? 9 felonies, that means there's a minimum of $9,000 worth of stolen items there, and 35 misdemeanor charges? I mean, that could be anything. At maximum, $35,000, well, just under. That's a lot of money. So, the detective had me stash a brand new laptop that had a GPS tracking unit stuck in it in my locker, then get it stolen deliberately so that he could get a warrant to search the property it had been taken to. Now, the fun thing to stress is that the laptop was over $1,000 value, pushing the theft from a misdemeanor into felony level. And there were also those 8 other felony charges, stuff like jewelry that was stolen from other people's lockers and recovered. So any of the locker break-ins that amounted to over $1,000 stolen was a felony charge, and less than $1,000 was a misdemeanor. The cool thing was that because the calculator and the laptop were on separate days, and the combination changed between the days, Dave caught a felony and a misdemeanor charge off of me alone. Here we go. The 9 felony thefts ended up in the $12,000 range total, and the 35 misdemeanor charges were somewhere in the range of $3,000 total in value. Wow. $15,000 from stealing from school lockers. That's insane. Now look, that is an awful lot of stuff stolen, but I need to stress that this is only what was proven stolen. Like, this is what they caught him with in his possession that they could trace back to someone. Oh my goodness me. Think of all the stuff that he might have stolen and sold on, or just, I don't know, hidden somewhere else. This could be like tens of thousands of dollars. Oh my word. They also didn't let them plead to anything. It was our town's highest profile crime in years, and without a doubt, one of the worst crime sprees the county had seen in decades. Next up on the revenge. Everyone who had been charged $150 to get their locker combinations changed sued the school district in a class action lawsuit. The justification was that the school did nothing to investigate the 44 proven and more than likely 200 plus unproven cases of locker theft, and then charge money to get the locker combinations changed. There was 218 people in that class action lawsuit, and in total everyone got $85 after attorney's fees. Alright, quick maths in my head. That's about, what, $18,000, roughly $18,000. Wow. The principal also lost his job for being a bonehead and not bothering to attempt to deal with the massive problem that was reported to him going on at the school. The fun thing I need to point out is that the school brought in a locksmith to change out the locks. That's why the justified charge was $150. Well, the school already paid the $150 per locker, but they also had to return $100 per locker, meaning that they were out $21,800 plus their legal fees for that class action lawsuit. Oh my gosh. Next comes the criminal trial and the fallout. Now, having attended much of the best parts of the trial, I will say this. They had Dave on camera entering 20 plus lockers, and they had him in possession of stolen goods for every single charge they made against him. The judge was also not amused that there was likely other reported crimes that they got away with because they couldn't prove it or they weren't reported. So, Dave was charged, and that was that. But the most important thing is that I got my graphing calculator back. It had my name engraved inside the battery compartment. I still have it today, as well as a cool story to tell. Wow, so you're telling me that this one kid, Big Dave, with the help of his mother, stole, I don't even know how much. I mean, over $20,000 minimum, let's just say that. But the fact is, think of all the items that were stolen, all the people that may not even realize that things were stolen from them, and everything that wasn't found then can't be added onto this like trial, you know, onto the charges. We're probably looking at, I don't know, in retrospect, 30 to 40, maybe even $50,000 worth of items. That would be my genuine guess here. I mean, look, $20,000 in the title, because I don't want to clickbait you guys, but I reckon we're actually close to about 50k here. That is incredible. What is so shameful about this is that the principal doesn't even care. That's the most shocking thing, right? If one thing was stolen from a locker, there would be, the school would be shut down. I'm not even joking. If there was one expensive thing, like a laptop or something, even a $200 calculator that was clearly stolen from a locker, there would be, it would be mass hysteria. I'm not even joking. There'd be a massive investigation. I remember one time in class, we weren't allowed to leave a classroom because someone's pencil case had gone missing. Like, that was a sort of level that it was. Yeah, maybe a bit too far, but you see what I'm saying? $50,000 worth of stuff, I'm roughly estimating, gets stolen. And the principal says, no, you've told people your combinations. How about 200 people all haven't done that? You idiot. Now for our second story of revenge. My client refused to pay for my service. Now, her Facebook ads tell her she's a scammer. So, I was hired to make an advertisement for this cosmetic startup. I normally don't accept local clients because I've had a lot of bad experiences with them, but this client sounds like she's willing to pay my service, so I accepted her. I actually didn't charge that much. I only charged her $60 per week, and on average, I charge a foreign client $300 per week. The first 2 weeks were good. She provided me with every material I needed to make an effective advertisement despite her limited budget. However, we began having an argument after that second week. She suddenly demands that our ads should have at least 1,000 clicks per day, which is freaking absurd because her budget only allows her to have around 1,200 reaches per day. I told her that for that to be possible, she should increase her budget. Suddenly, she calls me a fraud, despite my ads having at least 300 clicks per day, and now she refuses to give me her payments. For the last 2 weeks, she's been ignoring my calls. This weekend, I think my number's been blocked. Stupid her, because she didn't remove me from her page. So, I decided to be petty. Her ads are still running, so I decided to change them. I changed the pictures to a text post which says, "Don't buy this. The owner refused to give me my salary. An irate VA she called a fraud for not meeting her absurd expectation." I also included screenshots of our conversation to back it up. I did it last night, and I'm sure at any moment she'll contact me, but I'm done with her. That $120 she owes me is hers to keep. As for me, I'm not accepting local clients anymore. I'm just done with them. Okay, look, obviously it's a shame that OP didn't get their money and kind of got swindled and taken advantage of. But for 1 second, sit back, relax, and just start laughing. Imagine you go on Facebook and you see an ad that literally says, "Do not buy this, don't click on this, this person's a scammer." If anything, that would make me want to click on it. A little bit of reverse engineering. So, sorry, OP. Turns out you are actually really good at your job, getting more clicks than you even tried to. Good stuff. I really want to know what happens when this person finds out, like what her reaction is going to be. She's probably going to be so gutted, but it's definitely fair because come on, that's the problem with these sort of things, these sort of freelance things. You kind of want to be able to ask for the money up front, but it's just not a done thing. So you just end up relying on customers to do the right thing and pay you eventually. But does that always happen? Clearly not. Now for our third story of revenge. Messy guest trashed their room. I sent evidence of their messy lies home with them. Alright, today I did something out of nothing but pettiness, but I feel I've done the right thing in the long run. Don't get me wrong, this was done purely for my own satisfaction, but reflecting, I feel I'd want to know this sort of thing if I was in this guest's girlfriend's shoes. I recently started a new job as a housekeeper at a popular chain hotel. And while I'm enjoying it, the vomit rooms from stag do's, etc. really irritate me. They always somehow manage to get it on the only carpeted area of the room, and it puts me behind schedule, having to scrub at the carpet. This one room today really took it to the next level. Rubbish scattered about, food jammed down the sides of the bed, as well as vomit patches all over the room. It took a while to get through all the mess, but towards the end of clearing, I found a birthday card addressed to the guest on the floor. The card was open and read, "Happy birthday, I love you so much, have a great birthday weekend away, I'm gonna miss you so much, love, Beth." I picked up the card to bin it, and when I closed it, I saw the front read, "To my amazing boyfriend on his birthday." My eyebrows immediately raised. I'd just picked up multiple condom wrappers, seen the used ones in the bin, as well as finding a pair of used women's underwear and a torn dress in the sheets. I was originally going to throw the dress and underwear away as they were both clearly torn beyond wear, and the guest had most likely intended for me to do that, but dang, I was mad about that vomit and crusty food. This poor girl has been cheated on by a man who trashed the hotel room, but luckily for her, he angered me. I took the torn dress and underwear down to the reception and logged them into our lost and found with the room number attached. Our system always sends a copy of lost item emails to the emergency contact as well, just in case the guest misses the email. Therefore, the cheater and his emergency contact will soon receive a friendly email with a photograph of the forgotten items and a description of what they are and where they were found in the room. Who is his emergency contact? Of course, his girlfriend, Beth. If you're gonna cheat on your SO, don't pee off the housekeeper. Yeah, well, that one was just absolutely brilliant. I'm sorry, if you leave a room like this, then you are a disgraceful person, first off. Surely there's like an extra cleaning charge or something. Like if there's food everywhere, if the room's a total mess, food everywhere, vomit on the carpet, etc., etc., to the extent that it's gonna take a lot longer than normal to clean it, surely the hotel should be charging more at that point. I don't know. I don't really think that's a done thing, is it? But I think in situations like this, it probably should be. You know what? One way of charging a guest is by doing what you did, OP. Ruining their relationship is completely deserved. You have to admit, it really is. And I do agree with OP. If I was in their footsteps, in this girl's footsteps, I would want to know. Therefore, I think it's perfectly reasonable. And also, the guy's an absolute douche and just ruin the room for you to clean up. Yeah. Good stuff. I was called an ungrateful brat, so I acted as such. This whole thing happened a year prior, but the repercussions are still happening, and I hope they continue until the day this monster dies. This will be long, so buckle in. Background. Growing up, me and my sister had no love towards our father whatsoever. I'm not going to bore you with details, but alcoholic, abusive, violence are the few words that come to mind. When my sister got accepted into a much better, but also further high school than our local, she moved immediately and rarely visited. We were 10 years apart, so I was 4 at that time. I grew up resenting her for leaving me to deal with his BS all by myself. But now I understand better, and we're on good terms. My local factory was so big that it supported my whole town. Virtually everyone worked there, so everyone knew each other. My parents did too, but then it's purchased by the Defense Ministry, and they decided to cut off anyone without at least a high school degree. My mother was let go, and this was after she'd had me 4 months. My father, however, made it into retirement and was granted military status. Basically, they gave him an honourable rank, so his pension would almost double. But also, you'd have to act accordingly, because, in terms of speaking, you're military personnel now. My childhood was an absolute nightmare, so needless to say, I turned out to be an absolute mess. Anger management and mental instability are notably the worst, and I'm still working on them. When I turned 18, I enlisted. 2 major benefits. It didn't cost money, and I could never come home if I didn't want to. For me, it was literally a highway out of hell. Fast forward 3 years later, I got an honourable discharge. Turned out I had actual mental problems. Who would have known? I got a bulk load of money, and even more in the following months when they were able to process my military insurance. I came home to find my town incredibly underwhelming, and my father hadn't changed a bit. Now, not wanting to spend the rest of my life in this hellhole, I took what I could and moved to the city where my sister was living. The last words dear old dad said to me were, "You'll never make it." Because apparently being discharged for a mental illness showed that I was a coward. Also, I think he didn't like that I was tougher than the boy who used to obey his every word that I once was, and that I'd stood up for myself more in the few weeks I've stayed with him than the entire first 18 years of my life. I moved to a new environment, took up a blue-collar job, I was pretty beefy thanks to the military, and decided to pursue a career in IT, all the while taking care of my mental health. When it all started, sometime during this time, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. I was told it wasn't dangerous, but operations were required. My sister had actually reconciled with him, partly because of my mother, a few years prior, and would occasionally bring my niece home to visit them. She was quite successful, so she decided to pay for the whole thing. Operations, treatment, hospitals, recoveries, it was all hers. She paid for this while moving into a new house and buying her first car. Those things are pretty expensive in my country. By the way, OP is Vietnamese. My father had a huge bank account because of his pension, but he didn't have to pay a single penny. After a year or so, he's in recovery, and all in all, things are good. During this time, I was struggling with working and studying, living paycheck to paycheck, and I had to rely on a social program to get treatment for my illness. I visited him after every operation, though it wasn't anything tearful. If he didn't poke me, I was fine. After nearly a year of staying at my sister's house, he and my mother headed home after his doctor gave him the go-ahead. At that time, I was looking for a new job because the current job was horrible and it made my mental health actually worse. And I was lucky to find one where most of my skills were transferred and I had enough time to finish my studying. One day, my mother called in tears and asked me to come home that weekend. She told me that my father had been seeing someone else. Now, I must admit that I didn't trust this man, but at that point, I thought she was being paranoid. She still is, up to this day, about everything, and I resented the thought of going home on a 4-hour trip both ways, just for something that's utterly unimportant. So I calmed her down and swept it under the rug. Fast forward a few months, I got another call, this time from my sister. She came to visit that week with my niece to inform us that she was 3 months pregnant. What was supposed to be a happy reunion, though, turned into an absolute poop show. Apparently, when my father left his phone unattended for a few minutes, his mistress sent him a very sexy picture, and my mum saw it pop up. Needless to say, all hell broke loose. My sister said that was the first in many years that she'd seen my mother scream bloody murder at my father. And when he tried to hit her, my sister threw herself in between, which prompted her husband to throw himself in between. Because, you know, she's 3 months pregnant. It all ended in a very teary trip back to our city after hours of hurling insults at each other. The only good thing that came out of it was my mother somehow was able to bring his phone with her. We convinced my mother to get a divorce, but she's the submissive housewife who thought divorces were worse than boiling live puppies, and I think back then she still somewhat was hoping that he'd turn around. They'd been together for almost 35 years at that point, so I figured something must have been there. She didn't want to go through the divorce, so we dropped it and decided to cut him out for good. Lo and behold, half a year after the incidents, my father's side of the family started to contact me. I have a strict no-call policy, where the only people allowed to call me outside of work hours are my mother, my sister, her husband, 3 of my best friends, and only recently my boyfriend. So, to my bamboozlements, my father, his sister, and his mother all called me within a day. They suddenly acted so nice, convincing me to come and visit them. Obviously, that was all a ruse. After the incident, my father's side all blamed my mother and said she should have kept it a secret and not made a mess for the family's sake. They also disavowed me and my sister because we were ungrateful brats after we didn't accept their ultimate argument: he's your father after all. Out of morbid curiosity, I ventured back alone to see what the calls were about. Turned out they wanted to sell his house. It was on my grandmother's land. Back when he was about to undergo his first operation, we didn't know how it would turn out, so we transferred the house to my name because apparently inheriting a dead person's estate in my country is a living nightmare. Out of convenience, we convinced my grandmother to give me the land as well, since she was very old, 80 at the time. This was back when we were on good terms. I knew for sure they'd rather gouge their eyes out than follow up with any of that if it had happened a year later. I smelt something in the air, but I couldn't quite place what it was. I knew it was there though. So I told them nicely that I would think about it and immediately went back, faking an emergency. A plan formed when I was driving back, and that's the first time I've been so pleased about anything that I actually cracked a smile. I went to my sister's immediately. My mum had been staying with her and laid out my plan. After a year of living in the city, my mum was much more open-minded, and it only took a bit of convincing for her to agree with the plan. So, the plan. My sister contacted a lawyer and asked what our options were. Because both the house and the land were in my name, they had no claim to them, and any paper that didn't have my signature on it would be considered useless under the law. They could try and claim it was rented out, but then they'd have to move far away in hope that I'd never be able to locate them, and I knew that that would be too much trouble for a couple of old folks. They could claim it's his life achievement, but because he and my mother never divorced, it's technically half hers as well. This is when I came up with an idea. I asked the lawyer, what if my mother filed for a divorce? He said it's highly unlikely the court would reward my mother's full claim unless we could prove that he was unfaithful before the separation. To his surprise, I could. Remember the phone that my mother brought back from that day? It was smashed during the fighting, but generally was still in one piece. She'd asked me to throw it away a few days afterwards, but my lazy butt just brought it back to my place and threw it in the loft. Sufficient to say, it provided us with more than enough proof of his indecency. Now guys, I just want to jump in here and say that in Vietnam, infidelity is actually a crime. It's one of the rare countries where infidelity is a crime, but it's a crime. That is the reason why proving OP's dad's indecency is such a big thing here. Let's carry on. The execution. After weighing up our options, I called to inform my father that I would come home the next month to make an announcement. He was eager to hear it. Upon my arrival, they were so nice and sweet and whatnot, but after I introduced my lawyer, it's like they flipped a switch and suddenly became vile and violent. I presented my dad with two options. 1, relinquish any claim to the house, or 2, be served with a lawsuit. In my country, marital violations are 6 months probation minimum and up to 2 years in prison. There you go, guys. After a lot of screaming and name calling and feet stomping tantrums, he kicked us out. So naturally, I assumed he chose the latter. At the first hearing, my mum, me and my lawyer were present. It turned out to be another screaming contest in which he made up all kinds of lies about my mother. At some point, my lawyer leaned in to tell me that if the officer didn't stop his rantings, it's likely that they were buddies, and asked me to let him handle things. The officer told us this case wasn't a priority. It would take months to process. We wouldn't like the paperwork. It's best to settle this out of court. But my lawyer politely declined and told my father to expect another hearing soon under much less friendly circumstances. He tried one more tactic in between, which was calling all the relatives and telling them how my mother was a female dog and how I was an ungrateful brat in hope of creating some kind of pressure on us. Very few of them took his side, and even if all of them did, I would have never let him go that easy. In the second hearing, he finally cracked and agreed to my terms, which were relinquishing any claim he might have with the house and divorcing my mum. Basically, the only person who now has any claim to the house, apart from me, is my mother. I agreed to let him keep living in it for the rest of his life though, but not anyone else, aka his mistress, who he was basically living with. So then, now for the moment you've all been waiting for, the revenge. This is where my work really started. First, my sister gathered all the receipts from all the medical billings she has paid for his treatments. A few of them were missing, but we were able to put up a huge folder. I also pooped my pants learning how expensive cancer treatment could be. Not a fan. When we had a general sum of the money, we billed him for it. This is very unethical in my country, since children are expected to take care of their parents. But we threw that out the window long ago. We also knew it was not a criminal case, so we just went to small court claims and then sent in bailiffs to collect, which was just this lady. She went in with an I don't give a frick attitude, and when he failed to comply, she sent in the thugs, I mean the police, to start seizing assets. So, say goodbye to wooden furniture, a 27-inch smart TV, a fridge, and a reclining massage chair. All were bought by my sister as well. He had to pay out of his pocket because that lady insisted they continue seizing whatever he bought until she saw the money. Although the final amount was halved, my mother, under the eyes of the law, shared half of that for some reason. It still cost him about 70% of his savings. Of course, this was never about the money. We were just petty. We told the moving company they could do whatever they wanted with the furniture. Looking back, I should have taken the recliner because my back hurts like a mother effer, even though I'm only in my late 20s. After that was done, I contacted my local factory to file a report. Remember the sweet pension he got with the condition that he behaved accordingly? Clearly, someone had been a bad boy. Now initially, they let him go with it, even though it was a small town and everyone knew everything, because nobody ever filed a report. But that's not the case anymore. I gave them a very detailed folder with pictures from his phone. To say they were sexual was an understatement. They immediately set up a hearing and he was stripped of his rank, making his pension go down to just over half the original amounts. I know this because old folks gossip like their lives depend on it, and my mother is not excluded. She was very happy hearing all this, and it's all she talked about for a month. I was about to be done here, But a week later, my sister called to tell me that my aunt came to her door to berate her and her children. My sister was working from home. My mum also lived there but had gone out for some reason. My sister just called security to kick her out, and she warned me that my aunt could go for me next. I was seeing blood, not because of some lame butt Karen that could cause me inconveniences at most, but because she was screaming at my niece and nephew. As a gay man, I know full well the bloodline ends with me, so I put all of my love into those little guys, to the point that if I'd been there, I would have bitten her head off. So I dug a little and found out my aunt was knees deep in debt. She was hoping she could leech some money off my father, if not from the money he made selling the house, then from his big bank accounts. Since neither of those were available anymore, she was very angry and thought she could lay it on my sister. You want to know what a man could do with determination and raging hatred? I'd never set up an online social presence, mainly because up to my 18th birthday, I was too poor to have a phone, and then the military taught me it wasn't needed. But for this special occasion, I made an exception. I created a fake Facebook account and befriended her. I didn't even have to pretend to be anyone, since old people apparently accept friend requests from anyone. She had this vibe where she'd show off her money and her vacations and her items like a wealthy person. But from my mother and her trusty gossip circle, I knew that she always told whoever she owed money that she was struggling, so I figured she must be blocking them. The next part was easy. I just had to send all of her selfies to everyone she owes. I didn't have to declare myself since I was literally on a throwaway account. So it's just this really long line of messages that showed my aunt spending her money lavishly. For the next month, she was threatened. Not with legal actions like I did, but with much more sinister actions. She'd have thugs, not the police, throw gifts at her door. Gifts like paint, fish sauce, and sometimes literal poop. My mother also told me this, of course. She finally figured out what I was going to do when I told her to find me a list of all the people that she owes. Now for the ProRevenge. As much as I want to take credit for this, the idea wasn't mine. Forgive me for I once again have to lay a bit of background. My father's side of the family is this very traditional family where you would have a person acting as the head of the family, deciding on things that matter. This was way before the war, so obviously they don't do such things anymore. But the head of the family still has a certain voice, and there's this once in a year ceremony where we gather together to pay tribute to our ancestors. During the ceremony, the head of the family will give a speech, and then some announcements like who died, who got married, who gave birth, etc, etc. Then there'll be a celebratory party where we basically just get very, very drunk. My great-grandfather was the head. He had 3 sons, and 2 of them died during the war. So my grandfather took the mantle, then my father, and eventually me. This whole side of the family is in another town that's like 3 hours away from our town, mainly because my grandfather didn't expect to be the head, so he moved out seeking opportunities. I found these gatherings rather redundant and unnecessary, but that year I was actually looking forward to it. My father tried to keep the actual date of it hidden. It wasn't fixed, but generally it was sometime in June. But he seriously underestimated my mother. She doesn't have one gossip circle, she has an infinite number of them. So, my mother, me, and my sister's family all head back for it. The trip was 14 hours in total, but the result was worth it. We timed it so we'd get there 2 days earlier than my father, again thanks to her gossip circle. This side of the family had never heard the full story before, only the version that my father gave them, which was that he and my mother had separated in good faith. I actually give my father some credit for not bad-mouthing my mum. After weighing up all the pros and cons, we decided to let my mother loose, and she is exceptional when it comes to relaying details about her personal tragedies. I kid you not, if I posted her story, word for word, by this time next week there would be a global justice for OP's mother movement. It took just one day for everyone to know what a butthole my father had been. The look on his face when he arrived, with my aunt and my grandmother, and saw my family already there was priceless. He got the stink eye from everyone for the rest of the day. Nobody would initiate conversations with him, so he just sat there like a sad little dog. Now, I know what they say about dead horses, but this idea was too brilliant not to follow through. My uncle, let's call him Oliver, came up with this. In the hierarchy, he is equal to my father, and in the event that my branch doesn't have a male successor, 100% what's going to happen, his branch will be the head of the family. He told me I should take up the mantle of the head. It was very sudden. I didn't have a speech ready. My father was supposed to do that, but Oliver told me I could just tell whatever I want because nobody really paid attention to that thing anyway. All the other elders were okay with it. The speech wasn't even the best thing. At the celebratory party, people would be assigned tables based on the family tree. Heads of each branch would sit together, their children sit together, the elders sit together, so on and so forth. Because I'd been elevated to the head of my branch, I'd be sitting at the big boy table. My father didn't even get to sit at my table because miraculously it was full, even though I could have sworn there weren't 10 of us and each table can sit up to 20. He had to sit at the regular table with my aunt and a bunch of nasty widows who didn't hold back on their snarky comments, so I was told. I don't think he'll ever come back to one of those anytime soon. The aftermath. My father is now just a miserable old man. His mistress left him because, surprisingly, she was after his money. He's living in our old house now with next to nothing. His retirement money, though halved, was good enough for him to live by. Last I heard, his cancer has come back, and obviously this time my sister won't be paying for it. He tried to initiate contact with my mother, trying to make amends, but we blocked his number and profile on my mother's account because she actually did consider it. She has her soft side. My aunt had to sell her house to pay for all the debts, or else they'd just continue harassing her. She now lives in a small house she bought off with the rest of her money. I felt bad for her husband because he's actually chilling quite nice, but he's not the most decisive, and therefore doesn't really confront her. I hope he's doing better. I've got no empathy for her only son though. Let's just say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. How do I know all of this? My mother's gossip circle, of course. I left my grandmother out of all this because she's very old. She's not demented in any way, she's perfectly sane, but she loved her son too much to admit he's in the wrong. Also, she was very nice and sweet to me growing up. I've got a lot of good memories with her. I'm sad because she no longer sees my mother in the same way. I also stopped talking to her and would only visit her once during Lunar New Year. She's lived in the small house she and my grandfather built on the land that's now in my name. When she and my father are dead, I will carry out her wish to build an altar for her and my grandfather. Whether or not my father will be included is still up for debate. And there we go, guys. That concludes this epic tale of revenge. As I said, it's worth remembering that in Vietnam, infidelity is illegal. It's not just like cheating here or, in America, wherever you guys are watching. It actually is illegal. So it's a crime. It's a lot more serious than it would be in other parts of the world, perhaps. That's why I guess this revenge became a little bit more nuclear than it may have been otherwise. But I mean, look, no one likes a cheater anyway. But yeah, in Vietnam especially, it's definitely not a good thing to do. It is pretty incredible, really, how one part of a family can just absolutely decimate another part and it be so justified and so worthwhile. There's something horrible about people just trying to, live off others and skimp off them, just take all their money. Like this aunt, for example. What a horrible person. I'm sorry. But acting as if you've got loads of money, spending loads of stuff, and then not even repaying your debts. You're just a tragic person, I'm sorry. It's just true. As for the dad as well, a terrible person, obviously. I mean, no one likes a cheater at the best of times. OP has actually said, which is something that I think is very fair of them, that if the dad had just been open and said, look, this is going to happen, I'm not feeling a certain way anymore, just been completely, good with it, honest and acted in good faith, then her and her sister and her mother, etc. would never have gone to these lengths. But instead, he tried to scream and punch his way out of it, and yeah, that didn't really work, did it? I mean, one last thing that I think I would have done personally, just to make it as nuclear as possible, is to kick him out of the house. Give him nothing. But, maybe your mother wouldn't have wanted it. You do seem like a genuinely kind person, so maybe you thought that was a little bit too far. Just something that came to my mind. Comment down below. Would you have kicked the dad out entirely? Up to you lot. You decide. I orchestrated a vast conspiracy to get a co-worker fired. I used to work at a hospital data center in the network operations group. We physically sat in a room 24/7 next to the servers to make sure things didn't catch on fire, monitor it for alerts, and did routine things like swap out tape backups. But it was pretty simple work. This was ostensibly a tech job, but there were people who had been there for many years back when you had to change out printer paper and run a command from an IBM mainframe. It was on really specialized hardware and software that was difficult to apply elsewhere, so it had become a dead-end job. And because there were people who weren't tech savvy at all really, we weren't given much responsibility. You can't tell some people they can log into a server and others not, so we were reduced to the lowest common denominator. We were a network operations center where nobody was allowed to interact with any network equipment. Lowest common denominator, you say? Meet my new supervisor, Karen. Not her real name, but definitely her real spirit. She'd been there for over 20 years and got the job solely based on seniority. She was a sociopathic narcissist and one of the most unpleasant people I've ever encountered. Shortly after I was hired, we were bought by another hospital and combined data centers. Karen was demoted to shift lead and had to work with us in the 24/7 rotation. She was very bad at her job, and our responsibilities diminished to very little. We had no agency to fix any problems of our own because it had to be a problem that Karen could solve, and Karen was both lazy and stupid. After a couple of years, I was promoted. On my first day after they announced my promotion, Karen said, "You will fail," just straight to my face. But she had a powerful tool at her disposal. The hospital bureaucracy. Since the place was unionized, the hospital had a just cause firing policy instead of an at-will policy, even for non-unionized employees. This I think generally a good thing. But on the edges, it set up ridiculous situations where it was impossible to lose your job unless you were really egregious about it, with repeated violations, or you just showed up drunk or high. Like, we had someone steal computer equipment and they kept their job. It was nuts. And Karen had been there for nearly 30 years, so she wasn't getting fired without a lot of work. That's okay. She was terrible at her job. One of the most important things about the job was monitoring for an alert which would pop up, and there was a procedure we had to go through in order for some data to go through. If we didn't do this, then a nurse wouldn't get their lab results back. So, in one case, an alert came in, Karen saw it, then decided to keep browsing the web. Because of this, a patient from the cardiac ICU was going into surgery, and the doctors and nurses operating on that patient couldn't get a white blood cell count, I think. Look, I'm not a doctor, I just work in a building with a lot of them. Something very dangerous for this patient though, and the patient actually died. But this still did not get Karen fired. The reasoning from HR? Well, it didn't directly lead to harm. She didn't even feel bad about it, just a complete soulless sociopath. Now, I'm real pro-worker in general, but some jobs you just absolutely have to do. I was so mad, she had to go. I kept a paper trail of everything she messed up on. It wasn't nitpicky, literal life and death stuff we're talking about here. Verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, termination. Yeah, a slog, and I'd rather spend my time doing anything else, but that's the way it went. Then, Karen figured out she could work the system. As she approached work Armageddon, termination, she would tell HR she was being harassed. The person harassing her was different every time, which would trigger a mandatory investigation. These investigations took about 6 months, and of course they wouldn't find anything, and we'd carry on. Except these warnings, they had a 6-month expiration, so she could always reset the clock when it got close. Everyone was helpless. Even the CIO couldn't do anything about it because of the bureaucracy. Karen was a menace, and the entire IT department had to interact with the data center staff, and that meant interacting with her, and she was universally disliked. And she had 20 years until retirement, and she'd outlast the heat death of the universe. Then I had an idea. What if, under the guise of developing skills relevant to the 21st century, required everyone working in the Network Operations Center to pass the Net Plus exam? It's not a difficult exam, but it's not trivially easy. I felt pretty sure that everyone on the team fell above the line between able to pass and not able to pass, except Karen. We'd give everyone better titles, a significant pay rise, and entrust them to do more with the equipment, which is something everyone desperately wanted. Then people could actually leave the hospital with transferable skills and do something else if they wanted, and not feel trapped. I spent 3 years in meetings with HR, with my director, with the CIO, with HR again, job description meetings that took 6 hours to tweak small wording, hundreds of hours in meetings. Red tape heck, absolute red tape heck. Do you have any idea what it takes to approve a significant raise in a bureaucratic muck factory like that? But the raises were crucial because it would absolutely not be fair to ask us of them otherwise. Pass a test or lose your job without a large carrot attached would lead to mutiny. And then it got approved. I also wrote the exam requirements into my own job description. It was important to still be able to do the job and not let my skills lapse just because I was promoted. Also, this meant I could cover for people when they were on vacation or sick. Plus, I also got that sweet pay bump. It went over well. I was nervous, but the plan made sense, and I was able to communicate that. People would be more marketable. The job would be more interesting. And, most importantly, they'd be making 20% more than they were before. And I think it really helped that I also gave myself the same requirements when I absolutely could have chosen not to. The hospital would pay for off-site training. They would still get paid their full hourly during the training, including shift differential for second and third shifts. We paid for all the materials. I scheduled 8 hours a week for people to go someplace quiet and study. The job itself had a ton of downtime so people could study, but this was formally carved out time anyway. We pay for the exam, and if they failed, we'd pay for the second attempt. We were given 8 months to pass the test, so this is how it was for the 8 months. The whole point of this was I didn't want Karen to have any excuse whatsoever, and somehow convince HR that this process was rushed or unfair. Everyone passed on the first attempt, except Karen. Karen didn't pass her second or her third attempt, a bonus attempt. Karen, being the classic narcissist, thought this was somehow all about her, that this was a vast conspiracy engineered over multiple years and hundreds of hours just to get rid of her, and she'd tell everyone within earshot that's what was going on. Yeah, okay, Karen. You realize how insane that sounds, right? Not everything is about you. Sheesh. Well, okay, in this case it is, but still, only I and 2 other people know that. I remember the exact time and date we told her. She was in such deep denial that it could ever happen. She thought she was bulletproof. I don't think I'll ever achieve anything more satisfying in my career. I'm not usually one to take satisfaction in seeing someone's livelihood go, but she was uniquely awful. She was a patient danger, and it had been nearly a decade of working with her by this point. I was just so sick and tired of her BS. I was a hero the day after she was fired. I went to the main office for a meeting, and people were congratulating me like I just had a kid or won a marathon or something. Even the CIO. They were just happy for me that I didn't have to supervise Karen anymore. But in my headcanon, they were congratulating me for pulling off this elaborate plan. Morale back at the data center was also high. We learned interesting things. A couple of my co-workers left for better gigs elsewhere. The ones who were content staying were able to stay, and we all had more money and job security. And because anything could set off a BS Karen harassment complaint, people were stressed out working with her. Her being gone now was like a breath of fresh air. Newcomers were told stories of Karen, and they seemed exaggerated, but they were not. So, in order to solve a very important and extremely difficult problem, I pulled off a vast workplace conspiracy that improved the lives of the people I work with, in addition to keeping our patients safe. Getting this Karen fired is my greatest and most difficult accomplishment, and I can't even put it on a CV anywhere. So there we go, that is the end of that one, and all I'm left with is a sense of unfulfillment. I'll be completely honest. Listen, OP, you did what you could, and 3 years of going through all this BS just to get one person fired from their job is ultimate dedication. I have to give you that. But I can't get past the point that this woman inadvertently, or I guess maybe she knew, well, her actions led to a patient's death that was completely avoidable. Like, that's not enough just to get fired, I'm sorry. She needs more ramifications. Someone's died because of her actions. Like, that's mental. And again, I admire OP's patience. I love the plan to have people pass this test, and if you can't pass it, then you're gone. Knowing that everyone with any sort of common sense would pass it, apart from this Karen, of course. But yeah, man, do you know what I mean, guys? I just wanted more. She killed someone. Yeah, it wasn't directly, and there's no way of proving it was definitely her fault, but from what it sounds like, she is the sole reason why somebody's dead. And all that's happened to her, she's lost her job. I wanted more there, I really did, I'll be honest. Anyway, let's move on. I was told to do what I needed to do, so I did it. This is very recent. I was living in a very bad part of a major metropolitan city that has lots of bad parts. After I moved in, I started noticing a lot of things that were unsafe. Most of the things I brushed aside because they didn't necessarily affect me. 3 things I complained about were the fact that the common areas and most of the bedrooms had no smoke detectors. Then, because I get home when it's very dark, I complained about the porch lights not working. I was promised over and over that this would be fixed, but it never was. I pressed harder and threatened to call the city. I also withheld my rent at this point. The landlord, a woman, told me, There's nothing wrong with the house. Do what you need to do. So I did. I called the city. An inspector came out and I showed him around the property. There were areas I couldn't give him access to, like the garage or the other tenants' rooms. He took lots of pictures and pointed out dozens of safety issues and building code violations. It turns out this slumlord, referring to the landlord here, converted a 2-story house, 4-bed, 2-bath, into a 3-story house with 9 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms with no permits from the city. The owner of the property had also had the home classified as an owner-occupied single-family home, although it clearly wasn't, as there was no owner occupancy and there were 10 unrelated roommates. My landlord harassed me through the whole process. She took my parking spot away and pitted other roommates against me. To make matters worse, she told everyone I wasn't paying rent. So now I've got these idiots ganging up on me. It was so bad that I couldn't be in any of the common areas for even 1 minute without being harassed. I also got a bunch of notices accusing me of random things and an eviction notice because I wasn't paying rent. The report from the city came out and it had over a dozen violations, including some very serious ones. It was going to cost the owner tens of thousands of dollars to repair the house to get it up to standard. The house started to become safer. There were smoke detectors, railings for the stairs, working porch lights, a carbon monoxide alarm, and the owner was forced to put a railing on a balcony that didn't have one. Through all of this, the owner is making $10,000 per month in rents, charging for parking, and there's another large house on the property that he's renting. Plus, he's got multiple homes, with 90 tenants in total. He was making tons of money, but somehow the sentiment among some of the roommates was, how could you do this to this poor old man? My case went to court, and I got more time to find legal help. By the time the second hearing came along, another notice had been given as they got access to the entire house. Plus, they were still in violation and had not cured all of the problems, so they got fined daily. With my court date a week away, the owner's attorney started to try and negotiate with me. In court, I'd asked for $16,000, and they knew I was going to get it because they were obviously going to lose. So I ended up settling for $7,000 and 30 days to move out, plus 8 months of rent forgiveness. I guess I just did what I had to do. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised with this one. I thought the implications on the owner and the landlord would have been far greater than just $7,000. I know it's a lot of money, and 8 months of rent relief is also a lot of money. What's that? $8,000 as well. So they've lost probably, what, $15K flat, and then some other fines. But I feel like it should have been way more. They were breaking the law here. $15,000 and a little bit more surely isn't enough to cover that, is it? I don't know, maybe it's just me. It just seems extremely lenient. They had 10 people in a house when they said the owner was living, like, that's fraud. You can't do that. I'm pretty sure if you did that in my country, and I do mean this, you would be going to prison because that is fraudulent. I don't see a way in which you could get away with that. Comment down below, what are the normal rules in America? I want to know. I guess the overarching point is, why do landlords have to be like this? Why are there so many landlords? I swear it's a normal, common thing with landlords to just be terrible. It's easy to be a nice landlord, isn't it? Do the jobs that you have to do when the house is falling apart, get paid rent, and then just sit back and relax. Is it not as simple as that? You're earning good money. This guy's got 90 tenants. I mean, think of the turnover. It's ridiculous. Fair play to him, building a nice business, but don't exploit people like this. Don't make them live in terrible conditions, and don't break the law, you mug. Students said some misogynistic and abusive things, so I took screenshots and sent them to all of his followers. This happened around 2 years ago on Instagram. At the time, there was a viral video going around of some guy repeatedly punching a stray dog while laughing out loud. Now, someone random posted the video, and in the comments, most people were saying that the guy should be arrested. But this student was defending the dude, basically arguing, why would you ruin a young man's life for the sake of some worthless stray dog? I had an argument with him in the comments for like 15 to 20 minutes until I gave up. Then he started sending me direct messages saying stuff like, people like you are the reason that these parasites, stray dogs and cats, exist in our cities because you provide them with food and water. I said, so what are you gonna do about it? And he kinda went berserk, saying he'd beat me up and do stuff to me if he sees me, just a bunch of very violent but childish comments. So I went to his page. He had like 100 followers, and he was apparently a university student. I took some screenshots of what he'd sent to me. Believe me, a lot of really violent and abusive stuff with details, and I started sending them to his followers with an explanation. Instagram wouldn't let me send so many DMs in a short time, so I got my friends to help me. Some people wrote back to us, most of them girls, saying that they were extremely disappointed in him. A few days later, he messaged me and said, "Thank you for ruining my social life." His account was gone after that. OP, I love you for doing this. I rate it so highly. Too much of the time, people think that because you're online and you're somewhat anonymous, you can get away with saying disgusting things that you would never even dream of saying in real life to that person's face. But because of people like you, OP, people are starting to realize that you cannot just get away with being abusive and downright horrible online. Look, we saw it at the Euros. If you remember back to summer, people were sending the England football players, if you didn't know this, horrible, racist, abusive stuff after we lost the final. Now, I think back in the day, that wouldn't have gone reported, but now, thankfully, people are more aware and people are reporting this sort of stuff, and now you can't get away with saying this. It needs people like you, OP, to keep reporting, keep outing these people, keep embarrassing them, to make people realize that you can't just say whatever comes to your mind online. Good stuff. I love it. And as for this guy saying, "Oh, you ruined my social life," no, you ruin your social life by being misogynistic and abusive. Sorry, pal. Don't want to work on our assignments? Fine. Neither do I. This happened a few years ago in college. I had a class about entrepreneur projects, and that semester was building a business on paper. Basically, we had to figure out what the business would be about, how it would work, and how much money it would need and make. I did this subject in a different class, so that I could have Fridays free. So I didn't know anyone in there except for one guy. Let's call him Mark. I teamed up with Mark and 3 other people to be our group. At first, things were working like a charm, since we only cared about passing the subject, and we didn't really care about our grades. So we'd each do a part on an assignment. We had to deliver assignments each Wednesday, but we still got max scores on them. Our grade would basically be based upon all of our deliveries and some points on individual tests. Important info for later. It didn't take much time for things to go downhill though. It reached a point on the project that basically we couldn't modulate the work anymore. The 5 of us would need to sit together and brainstorm about the next steps. More specifically, when we reached the point of how we'd earn money with our business. Either that, or one person would do everything alone. My group chose the second option, and this is what basically happened for 6 weeks. On Friday, I'd send a message on our WhatsApp group, like, "Guys, we've got to deliver this stuff on Wednesday, when do you want to meet?" Saturday, no responses. Sunday, the 2 checks would turn blue, meaning everyone's read the message, but still no response. Monday, I sent a follow-up message, no response. Tuesday, I would work my butt off and deliver it alone. Wednesday, 2 hours before the deadline, somebody, usually Mark, would send a message, "Hey, how do you guys want to do it?" Which I'd answer, "It's already done," and they would thank me and promise to release me from doing anything on the next assignment, which wouldn't happen and the cycle would continue. After 5 weeks, I was fed up and got in contact with the teacher. Her response was that it was too late to do anything now because she couldn't assign me to another group and she couldn't give me special treatments. But she told me to check my grades because most likely I'd already passed the subject. I looked at it, and with my individual tests and what I'd already delivered on the project, I got a grade high enough to barely pass the entire subject. Now this was kinda effed up, but all the individual test grades and projects as well for everyone in my class were public. So I could see that nobody in my group had passed. The closest was Mark, but he didn't deliver one of the individual tests, so he'd still need to do something to pass. I could then and there be the bigger person and say something like, "Guys, look, I've already passed a subject, start doing something, or I'm not doing anything anymore." But I can be petty sometimes. On the 6th week, I didn't do anything. Wednesday arrived and Mark tagged me in the group, asking if I'd done anything. I remained silent. Panic started arising. Group members texted me in private. I removed the blue scene icon in my WhatsApp and would read the messages in airplane mode so they wouldn't see me online when reading, except for the group messages because they would see that I read them regardless of leaving that setting on or off, so I didn't read them. Apparently, when you don't do anything related to the project in 5 weeks, it's hard to figure out what to do next. Deadline passes. I go to sleep. The class was at nights, at distance because of COVID. I wake up the next day, I have several name callings, assignment was not delivered, and the group was threatening to report me to the teacher. My answer was very simple. The teacher is already aware. I'm not doing anyone's work other than mine. You can all go to hell. And I left the group. At the end of the semester, only Mark and I passed. Now they got their poop together in the end, but not enough for the other deadweights to pass. That was the sweetest grade 6. Grades here go from 0 to 10, 6 is the bare minimum to pass, that I ever got. Now, Mark never talked to me again, but it was for the best. Oh wow, this is probably one of the most relatable revenge stories that I've read. I don't know, I'll be honest, where I lie. Am I more like OP? Am I more like Mark in terms of the work that I did when I was at school and uni? I definitely got better as I went along and got up to higher education, but let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, comment down below. Where do you fall? Are you the sort of person that just ends up doing all the work and, you know, other group members don't? Or are you like Mark and you just would rather someone else do it? I'll be honest, I'm not sure where I lie. I'll leave that one to my teachers. Now, it doesn't take away from the fact that doing what Mark and the other group members did is terrible. And it's amazing, OP, that you've been able to do this and just absolutely mug them off. They had no idea. The panic that must have been going through their veins on that Wednesday morning. Ugh, horrible. I hate to even think about it. But hey, fail to prepare to fail. That's what I've always said. And Big Mark, he just about got away with it. The others, though, nah. And they didn't deserve to, by the way. They didn't deserve to. Hanging off the coattails of UOP, using your good work, is not enough to get a good grade. I'm sorry, it's just not. Can I just say, shout out to the teacher? Because yes, the teacher said it's too late to do anything serious about it or change group, but they did let you know that you could do something sneaky here. If you wanted to, you've already passed. That was enough for you to check it yourself and realize, oh, snap. Here we go. Time for some good revenge. And I love it. I partnered with a racist. I'd recently partnered with a small production facility in my area. Our contract was based on capital investment along with designing and implementing new automation processes. 2-year outlook finished in just 8 months. It was a typical small production facility comprised of 50 production workers through 2 shifts of 12 hours that ran 2 days on, then 3 days off. It also had 2 production supervisors for each shift and 1 maintenance supervisor for each shift. The people and their attitude is ultimately what led to my decision to be more than an outside contractor for this company, until I worked the night shift for a week due to shutdowns that needed to occur to implement certain line upgrades. This is where I met him. We will call him Richard Head. Richard seemed like a nice guy in our first few encounters, and then I heard him in his element directing his maintenance crew at night over the radio. He would belittle this group of guys who were just there to do a set task list every night for whatever machinery they were doing preventative maintenance on, unless something broke on the line, which would require attention first, obviously. I have never heard grown men spoken to like this, and never heard any nasty remarks back or defending of themselves. He would call them stupid on the radio if they were having trouble troubleshooting a problem, call some fat and lazy, and he called one black guy the N-word. The guy had been there since they opened the doors, and to be honest, he made me want to rescind any commitment I've ever made to this company. When I escalated this up to the plant manager, he assured me that it was friendly banter and they rarely had complaints against him. True, because anyone who ever did so in confidence of anonymity was always outed and then singled out until they were terminated by him. Racism being friendly banter, guys. I've heard it all. Since no one was going to listen to me, I decided to do my due diligence and started to document everything I heard on the radio with a date, time, witnesses to the treatments, and what rights the individual was having violated due to our state and federal outlines. I made this spreadsheet my entire time in the shift, documenting every personal account I witnessed as well. Harassment is a major problem with industry work, but the one that I've learned is the company killer is retaliation. If you can prove that, then they stand no chance. I saw Richard Head one night tearing down this 50-year-old man who requested 2 days off, to the point I wanted to lose my cool, but I knew that it would ruin all the information I was gathering. The days off, by the way, were because his nephew was just in a car accident 2 days prior and had to have multiple reconstructive surgeries scheduled. So I knew that now was the time to move on everything. I rounded up all the maintenance guys and shared all my documentation with them, but they didn't realize the importance of this information like I did. They just said that nothing will change, but nothing changed because nobody treats an issue as an issue if you come with incorrect, non-detailed information. The fact that Richard had used the radio so much was a godsend that they didn't see as well. When he spoke this way to people, he must not have ever realized that there are other supervisors on shift, and that they, in fact, unintentionally became the strongest witness in the cases, especially when you have some audio recordings verifying the accounts. They have no choice but to acknowledge what they've heard. Each worker took their logs, and even though I have a capital time investment in this facility, I urged them at a minimum to petition to have this man removed or to threaten legal action. So what I'm getting from this is that even though OP is newly partnered with this company, he still selflessly, in part, wants to take them down. Anyway, once they coordinated a day to expose all of this, it was like watching a sports movie when the underdogs take the championship and get the girl at the same time. Not only did the man finally get fired, but the entire atmosphere around the place changed more than I could imagine. All the machines ran the best they've ever ran in my time there, and people loved coming to work again. They also put a placard on my door for when I came in about a week later. It said #1 boss, but the boss was crossed out and hand engraved under it was the word badass. I obviously removed it from my door, but I put it in my home office, and it's probably the best thing I've ever received from a facility. You know what, OP? I actually really rate your selflessness here, because the fact that you've just partnered with this company would suggest to me that you don't want to disrupt too much, you want to keep it going. You've obviously seen enough to partner with it in the first place that you like. However, a little setback in the short term, having to do all this stuff, get somebody fired, you know, it's not good for the company. You lose money doing that, is clearly beneficial in the long term. I like that you did that, because look, there's no room for racism and just abuse, is there, at any company? And you can tell the positive effect that it immediately had afterwards. So yeah, clearly a good decision. And I love that even though you probably were like, have I made a mistake here partnering with this company? If they employ people like this, you're like, no, we can get through this. Get this geezer gone. We'll be back to our best. And clearly that's what happened. Good stuff. And again, friendly banter being racism. Like, I know I said it whilst I was reading, but what? Are you 6 years old? That's a joke. Using my parking space? All good. You'll be using it forever. So, I'm living in Japan now, and here people ride bicycles a lot. You can't leave your bike anywhere and you have to pay for parking, between $1 and $2 per day. There are very few free parking areas for bicycles. Most people leave their bikes at the same place, so they pay monthly because it's cheaper and you have your own space. This event started a couple of weeks ago. Someone in my building started having a guest who decided to steal my bicycle parking space whenever they came to visit. Sometimes they'd stay the whole night, so I had to go to the station, pay $1 and come all the way home walking, which meant I'd need to walk to the station the next day, getting up earlier, walking like 20 minutes to the station, all while carrying my heavy bag. Now, all the bicycle spaces have a number, which means they are reserved for someone. Mine is 105, but this idiot decided to take mine whenever they came to visit. The second time this happened, I told the building manager, but they didn't do anything. The third time I saw the bicycle there, it was the same red, expensive bicycle. I left a note in Japanese saying, "Please don't leave your bike here. This is my space, and I need it every day." I found the note re-taped with the same tape I'd used to tape it onto their bike to my parking space, and it had a couple of bad words in Japanese at the end. Basically, he was not only stealing my space, but making fun of me by insulting me. Fine, it's just fine. I probably wouldn't have done anything about it if he hadn't written those words, but they triggered me and got the worst out of me. This person did it again a couple of times, so I knew this would continue. I was thinking about buying another bicycle, a better, more expensive one I could use to go on cycling trips. So a good chain or lock was needed anyway. I bought one of the thickest they had at the store and decided to try its efficiency. I locked his bicycle the next time I saw it there. It hasn't moved for the last 7 days. There were 2 notes. The first one was a very aggressive one, with more bad words and threats about going to the police. I don't care, let's go that way, buddy. The second note days later was an apology, and they begged for me to unlock the bike, because they tried to break it, but they couldn't. I guess he's learned his lesson. I'm pretty sure he won't do it again, but I just want to enjoy this feeling of victory for a couple days more. I'll let it free in 2 or 3 days, I guess. Now this is simply sensational, and let me say, it is completely justified. What an absolute clown. Stealing someone else's parking space is bad enough, But then, writing on their notes, their polite notes saying give it back, just with insults, that's even worse. You're a disgrace. You know what, if I was OP, I'd be inclined to say never unlock your chain. They deserve it, they really do. Because that's just, using someone else's property. It's very, very shameful. The only issue here is, if it is a very expensive lock, and it seems like it probably is, eventually they're going to have to go and get some massive bolt cutters, or maybe even something that's, a little bit more powerful, and then you'll break your lock and you would have lost a lot of money. But in principle, is it worth it? I think it is. Cancel a land lease and hope to make a windfall. Hope you like a lot of dirt. Let me preface this by noting that this revenge was not my doing. At least, not exactly. It happened back in the 90s when I was in high school and centered around the type of school I attended. So, in case you weren't aware, it's very common in agricultural communities to have what are known as farmers' schools. That's not a technical term, but more just something easy to define them. The schools are generally organized by the local farmers, and while you still study the various courses needed to get into college, you also study farming technology courses and get credit hours for work study, i.e. working on one or more farms. The area I lived in was surrounded by a number of large farms, which grew cotton primarily. So during the year, we'd spend time out in the fields, both tilling, planting, and harvesting. One of the farms near the school was this 1,000-acre spread that, like the others, grew mostly cotton, though sometimes they rotated to soybeans or silage. Basically, that's corn, but you don't harvest it. This farm had a long partnership with the school, so the students provided near free labor for the farmer. The farmer leased this property from some out-of-state owner and paid them a portion of the revenue from the harvest. Imagine my surprise then when me and many of my classmates arrived at the farm to do our work study, and the farmer instructed some of us to crew the sprayers and start spraying herbicide on the fields, while others, myself included, were to take tractors and discs and plow everything under. The farmer wanted every square inch of the fields returned to just dirt. We were shocked, to say the least. But after some discussion, we set to work. It took us the better part of a weekend to do so, and when we were done, the field was in a beautiful, if barren, state. The farmer thanked each of us personally and paid us about $500 each. That's quite the sum for a 90s high school senior. We returned to the school, told our headmaster that the contract was completed, and he informed us that the farmer would no longer be working with the school, and we'd be sent to one of the other larger farms for the rest of the year and our work study. It was probably 2 or 3 months later before word started going around about why we'd been instructed to destroy the crop. Granted, these were just rumors, but based on how things turned out for the farmer, I suspect there's some truth to it. So, apparently the landowner had decided that he was going to not renew the lease the farmer had on the land. This lease renewal just so happened to fall a few weeks before harvest season would start. Given that the average cotton farm earns about $1,500 per acre, a 1,000-acre farm would easily net the owner $1.5 million. About $500,000 of that would be pure profit. Now, I don't know what the farmer's lease was, but it stands to reason that it wasn't anywhere near that. So, this landowner had figured out a neat little trick. Let the farmer get a good crop planted, and then refuse to renew the lease. The farmer would leave the plants in the field, and the landowner would just need to pay some contractors to come and harvest it, and they'd earn a profit. How scummy is that? Since at the time, the farmer's lease wasn't yet up, he decided to prevent that from happening. His act of revenge against the owner was to prevent them from cashing in on their hard work. Sure, it destroyed his farm, and he had to sell off most everything he owned to buy some property for himself, but he'd proved a point. The owner did try and sue the farmer, though he didn't really have a leg to stand on, or so I was told. I think the court ruled that since the farmer was still under the lease when he had the land tilled under, then it was his property to do with as he wished, and thus the landowner couldn't tell him what to do with his property. I learned a rather valuable lesson from that man, beyond what I learned about farming. That lesson was, never, ever cross someone with nothing to lose. I mean, look, I know I said it as the story was progressing, but this is so scummy. I don't know how many years that this farmer has leased this land for, but to do that as the owner, make him do all the work and then just say, actually, no, I'm gonna have it back now and contract someone else to do the work at a cheaper price, making more of a profit for myself. That is so scummy. That is a definition of scum. It's so snaky as well. Like, all the work's been done. All that's left to do is yield the rewards, and then you say, no, I don't need you anymore. I'm gonna get all the money myself. scum. And look, it's obviously great stuff from this farmer. He's lost a lot of money doing this, employing these school kids at $500 a pop to go through and help him just destroy the land, turn it back into dirt. He's losing time, losing money, losing energy. He's gaining literally nothing from what he's doing, apart from that inner feeling of joy at knowing that he is enacting the best karma possible on this absolute douche of a landowner. You know what? This amazing story actually reminds me of one of my favorite ever stories of revenge from this subreddit. And yeah, let's throw it back to 2 years ago. I'm going to read it out right now. This one is phenomenal. Landlord advertises all of our company's equipment for sale to our competitors. Best follow our eviction to the letter. I work for a leisure company. Think soft play, indoor soccer, laser tag, can't be specific. Now, prior to lockdown, managers and the big bosses were negotiating the renewal of the lease on one of our parks. Things were going mostly smoothly. However, the landlords were difficult to contact. Then, 2020's trash hit the fan. All of our sites were closed and everything was thrown into a mess. Negotiations began to slip down the priority list. Nobody thought the landlord would push an eviction for an expired lease during this period, especially with it still getting rent, despite the site's closure, and the closure of every business and restaurant in the immediate area. We were wrong. A few days ago, we received a letter saying we had 7 days to leave the premises and take everything with us. We're reminded that anything left in the building after 7 days will become the landlord's property. That line is very important. Now, a lot of construction goes into installing our equipment into a new building, which makes emptying one even harder. At a lockdown with no staff and most businesses shut, it meant that saving much of our assets would prove to be extremely difficult. To lose a profitable site and all of its assets is definitely a blow to our company. But here is where it gets worse. A few days into our 7-day eviction, we find out that the landlord has been advertising our park to our competitors. But he isn't offering just the building, he's offering all of our stuff pre-installed. Ready to go, just needs rebranding. The landlord has evicted us from the property in an attempt to increase rent and make a solid profit from our equipment installed because he thinks we won't be able to empty the park. We were furious. And here is where a little bit of malicious compliance and revenge came in. We were told we had 7 days to move everything we owned out of the property, so that is what we did. Local businesses from all around offered up free space to store our things. A few people came back out of lockdown and they all spent the rest of the week removing, selling, or destroying everything that was related to us. We didn't even leave light fittings. In every other site vacation we have seen, we always end up leaving thousands of dollars worth of disco lights in the ceilings because they're too hard to get. We leave most of the construction in, as well as things like the bars and kitchens that all stay intact, recognizable as what they once were, but not this building. We ripped up the flooring we installed. We tore down the walls that were not part of the original structure, wooden walls to divide up the space. We ripped apart our manager's office and removed all artwork and lockers. The landlord now has every new deal he's been making dead in the water, and a large renovation bill to install new flooring, etc. Or a company willing to do it themselves like we were. Lockdown's been extended another 4 weeks, so he's got at least another 4 weeks without rent. We were paying, and he won't have any potential buyers. A little silver lining, the assets we got out of the site, fridges, TVs, equipment, food, tables, have all been sold, and the lack of rent and additional income has helped the business and paid staff wages. But that is not the end of the story. There's actually an update, guys. Here is what happened next. We handed in the keys, and it was probably the quickest handover we've ever had. The landlord clearly didn't want to make any kind of conversation, and there was definitely an elephant in the room, but he said nothing about the lack of equipment. Complications did arise when we went to get back various deposits, but he had no case to withhold the deposit from us as the building was in excellent shape. We conducted much of the maintenance work ourselves, so the building was in a significantly better condition than we found it. We also cleaned up 99% of the rubbish and dirt from our demolition crusade, so we couldn't even bill us for cleaning. A very minor bit of pressing from our legal team meant that we received everything owed back in full. Now, as of the time of this update, the building is still vacant, and as of yet, we don't know of any potential buyers. At this moment in time, our company is still standing, despite the pandemic closures and lack of business. Staff are all still employed and doing well. Guys, you can probably see after reading that why that is one of my favorite all-time Reddit stories, let alone revenge-based stories. I just love it. It's so good. It's similar to the one I just read, I know, but I just had to read it to you. It's just one of my favorite stories that I've ever read on Reddit. I just love every part of it. What can I say? It's just so nice, isn't it? When massive bosses that are just like idiots, trying to make as much money as humanly possible, not even caring about other humans. One more zero on the end of their bank sheet is all they're worried about, and then they just get shut down by great people like OP and their team, losing a lot more money than they would have done had they just kept going on as normal. We saw it in the previous story. This is an all-time classic example. It's just brilliant. I really do love it, and I hope you guys do too. Throw your trash in my yard. Enjoy moving. My now ex-neighbor was pretty trashy. Car sitting on blocks in the yard, cigarette hanging out of her mouth while she's 9 months pregnant, blasting Kid Rock tunes level trashy. Well, this lady decided that paying $1 per trash bag was just too much. Our township will only pick up your trash if it is in one of the approved purple bags though, so normal trash bags will just be left behind. The trash truck drives right past them. Her solution? Buy normal trash bags at the dollar store and have her 8-year-old child toss them over the fence into my yard. Now their trash is my problem. After confronting her, she just laughed, so I called the cops. They said that since the kid was so young and there was no proof of his parents telling him to do it, there was nothing they could do. So this went on for about 4 months. Me taking the bags of trash they'd toss into my yard and wrapping them in purple bags that I paid out of pocket for, putting them out to the curb. Pretty freaking annoying. Not to mention the extra $3 or so a week I'm spending on trash bags. I'm slowly growing to hate this woman. It was annoying at first, but now I was getting mad. Mind you, I own my home and she was renting hers. So, I get a hold of their landlord and I offer to buy the house for a decent amount above market value, 17%. He jumps at the offer, and soon I'm the proud owner of the house next door to me. Sure, it cost me $71,000, but what price do you put on peace of mind? The very first thing I did was serve them an eviction notice, in person. Across that same fence they like to throw trash over. That was 31 days ago. As of today, the unit is empty. I don't know where they went, but there's someone else's problem now. All because she didn't want to pay for her own trash bags. I think I'm going to knock that house down and make my yard bigger. I've been wanting to put in a handball court. Now, before I say anything about the story, can I first just say $71,000 for a house? Where? Please? Well, I know I've checked. OP has said they live in central Pennsylvania. $71K for a house. That would literally buy a shed. Where in the UK. I mean, that is unbelievable. Fair play. However, if you do have the money to do something like this, unbelievable, I've got to say. It just shows, and I kind of think to myself, what sort of revenge might I pull off, or might you pull off if you had unlimited money? Yeah, some pretty interesting things come to mind. I mean, like, it's pretty nice, isn't it? Oh, I hate my neighbor. Screw it. I'll just buy their house off them. Nice. Get them gone. Easy way out. I love it. I was unemployed. This guy scammed me. Revenge is still pouring on him. First and foremost, this didn't happen in the US. Some events might be pursuable up there, but down here, it was mostly no man's land regarding the kind of scams I fell for. For the sake of the story, here in no man's land, we use the top-level domain NML. My wife is a nurse. Back then, in the early 2000s, she worked in an ICU of a relatively exclusive, and therefore expensive, hospital. Specifically, she had to care for patients that had undergone cardiac surgery. At the same time, I was working for a small company that was going out of business. The owners were retiring, we hadn't secured any important contracts lately, and in my country, you have to pay for employee severance, unless you file for bankruptcy, so they decided to shut down while they still had enough cash to pay our severances. One day, my wife calls me and tells me about this gentleman in his late 50s that had been on the verge of passing away, and after that close call, he was so grateful and stuff. We'll call him Benny Lowy. This gentleman happened to work in electronic imports, which gave him access to incredibly convenient deals. Long story short, he was so grateful he could sell us an LCD TV, a store demo unit that had been used just once, and we need to pay like 1/4 of its retail price, as long as we kept it quiet because he was risking his relation with the brand. It caught me off guard. I said yes, and she paid. Anyway, the only TV in the house had been a wedding present and weighed over £100. We were eager to replace it. It was naive, I know, but I thought, being her patient, she knew all the personal data from this guy, so it seemed unlikely he'd target her for a scam. His father was a known businessman. Now retired and approaching his 80s, Mr. Lowry Sr. was well respected in his community and wouldn't have let his son wreak havoc. Also, my wife had acquaintances in common with Benny's brother, a known doctor of another hospital. Christmas was approaching. She asked Benny, who had already been discharged and sent back home, for advice regarding the present she wanted to give me. A phone. He hooked her up with the best she could think of. Now, I can't remember the exact model, but it was the Sony Ericsson flagship and it wasn't yet offered by local carriers. He had access to it because of his status as a local representative for said brand. She went with it. Paid. The job position. I've said my employer was shutting down, so just for the sake of it, my wife asked Benny if he knew of someone needing an IT guy. Of course, he said. I'll meet your husband at this place tomorrow, etc. And there I was, in a gas station, uptown, and he pulls over in a luxury car. Mr. Lowry was a normal looking guy. He used the cane and had a noticeable knee or hip pain. We sat down in the gas station coffee shop and he told me about a mid-management position, reporting to him in a mining company I'd barely heard about. He coached me on what I should say in the upcoming job interview. We spoke about salary. I was dazzled. But wait, mining? Didn't you say he was into imports? He was that kind of guy you can't pause to question because he'd already thrown something extra into the mix, and this position had a better paycheck than the one I was being laid off. In the next few days, we had a few phone calls and stuff looked promising. We agreed he'd pick me up on December 24th and introduce me to senior managers as the recommended help desk junior manager. I woke up extra early and put on my best suits, waited in the front yard. Hours went by. I planned to be back before noon to arrange stuff for that night's dinner because my parents were coming over. After calling him repeatedly, he told me he'd been assaulted and robbed. They took my cane and broke it on my knee, he wailed. Poor guy. I told him to forget about my interview for the time being. No, I promised you. I'll make it up to you. Of course, since he'd been injured, he wasn't able to deliver the items my wife bought from him. That night, my mother asked me about the new job. I could not bring myself to tell her about the delay. I told her it was going fine. That night, I googled him. Nothing showed up except for some awards in the Imports and Customs Associations of whatever. He called me to reschedule our interview, December 31st. Again, picture me in my best suit outside my house on a summer morning. Of course, he didn't show up. When I finally reach him, he tells me that, when his car was stolen last week, they took his wallet too, which these thugs eventually dropped during another robbery, so now he'd been detained as a suspect for that. He hadn't been able to pick the imported electronics on the customs office, so they had them moved to another custody unit where it would take a couple of weeks to retrieve. That night, we went to my parents for New Year's Eve, and my mother asked me about the new job. It's all fine, I said. I Google him again, this time with variations regarding his name or the supposed company he was setting me up into. Not much showed up, nothing shady. The next call was like a week later. He told me that, because he was being involved in a police investigation, the mining company had fired him. But this was actually good, because now I was going to be interviewed to take his position as IT manager. This meant double my former paycheck and securing a position that would be a leap forward in my career. So I don't ask many questions, I was just grateful. All those delays in the end would pay off. This situation, as you've already figured out, went on and on for weeks. My interview never happened. The electronics never arrived. We'd lost our money, our time, our Christmas, our hopes, and I was still unemployed. And I hadn't been applying for job offers since I had this one allegedly secured. I texted him, somewhere in between. I texted, "Why are you doing this to us?" He texted back, "If I wanted to, you have nothing on me. But if you stick with me, you'll be rewarded tenfold." Cue in the detective. Time went by. Eventually, my wife overhears from a co-worker about this patient in another hospital she was working at. Some nurses do work part-time at other hospitals. Now, she had fallen for it too, but her husband was a detective. So a few hours later, we were filling him in on the details of the scam we fell for. Asking around, he found a third nurse scammed by this guy. Soon enough, he was detained. this time for real. And he admitted to have been scamming people due to a mild dementia, impromptu invented by the way. This detective talks him into an off-court deal in which he gives us back every cent, but not my time nor hopes, in exchange for us not pursuing any legal action. This was a decent deal, because us, having failed to make a written agreement on any of these purchases, had at most a weak claim to our money. By the way, the money he paid us, he had to borrow from his father and some from his brother, a doctor. Remember, this didn't happen in the US? This agreement is actually completely legal down here. So, I made a blog. I couldn't go for any further legal action, but there wasn't a non-disclosure agreement whatsoever. And I thought, what could prevent other people falling into this scammer's lies? Well, perhaps some Google results. So I created a blog on WordPress.com. Think something like BennyLowerTheScammer.wordpress.com. It was a single post in third person telling my story. In the following days, that post comments had a dozen stories much like mine. I made them into a few posts. I got a few of their comments too, telling other people's stories. In a few weeks, looking for Benny Lowy's name on Google led to this blog. In my country, you can review updates regarding court ongoing cases, except for felonies that are non-public. Searching for his national ID, which I'd known thanks to our settlement, as the sued party, I could just find an eviction action due to failing to pay his condo's lease. But looking for him as the suing part, I found out he'd sued www.wordpress.nml, our local fictionary domain, which was registered by a local guy in GoDaddy.com. Following up with the case, this guy had spent months trying to demonstrate this local guy had to take down the blog I made in the .com domain. Go figure. I was tempted then and there to set a post on this blog saying, if I wanted to, you have nothing on me. However, I've never attempted to let him know that I am the one doing this, so OP is actually anonymous via this website. I just log into this blog once in a while. Today it was the first time in years, and I keep finding in the comments more scammed people. All of them in a vulnerable moment of their life. Unemployed guys, small startups looking for an angel investor, small branch salespeople pursuing a promising commission, those who have, in time, reached a compensation or agreements. It's because Benny's now ancient father had to chip in. From what they say, his brother has gone no contacts. Most of the commenters leave their email addresses, and I've known of a few that have teamed up with each other and succeeded in legal actions. Perhaps this is not a revenge story, but it's my story. Yeah, there you go, guys. As you could probably tell pretty early on in this story, it became quite clear that this person was just a scam artist. Gotta say, all the kind of signs were there, and it's easy for me to say that, but if you're actually in that situation and you know, you're in a bad place, just lost your job, needing money, etc., getting new deals, new tech, it does sound a little bit too good to be true, but when you're in your lowest point and you get someone like this coming along into your life, offering you the world, you kind of just gotta go with it, don't you? Well, at least that's what most people do. And the thing that is so horrible about these fraudsters and scam artists like this is that they always prey on the weakest. Because, you know, if you have a job and you've got the latest phone and stuff, you're not going to say, oh yeah, go on, I'll have a new job and I'll have the latest phone. You've already got it. So like people that are doing well don't really need that sort of stuff. They don't need help from some random person. Whereas, you know, people that don't have the stuff that they would like, they kind of do tend to fall for scams like this. That's kind of why traditionally fraudsters tend to target poorer people or people in strife or old people as well who are just less switched on in terms of tech and just, I guess, life. What I would say though, which is really interesting in this one, is that the person that was scamming you seemed to be reputable, at least at first. Like, yeah, as you said, a patient in your wife's hospital, you've got all their details. It's weird that they would you know, risk that sort of stuff, but hey, clearly they were confident enough in their frauding ability, and they now allow me to say that they are probably the biggest fraud. And this time I can say it and actually mean the word fraud. A lovely change. Alexa, play Bitch Ain't Shit by Dr. Dre. My crib midget has evolved into a mini-human, and my mini-human is now in an adult male body, which is, unfortunately, still outfitted with a teenage brain. Don't worry though, he knows everything. I myself have a late 30s model body, but my teenage brain is coming along well. That said, my loving wife is still able to maintain her sanity with 2.5 boys and half male adults in the house. However, our house was too small and we needed more legroom. We decided to move on up. The new house is everything we wanted. There's ample room for the growing family. The boys would conquer the upstairs and even have their own bathroom to grow science experiments. They occasionally fail to brush their teeth, but you can most certainly count on them to pee in or on everything except the toilets. Cake, my 11-year-old mini-human, shares my obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, and keeps his room in working order. Kelly, my 15-year-old man-child genius, well, just don't touch that sock under his bed. Typical boy stuff, I suppose. My wife and I now had a backyard. We had a 2-car garage to store her Christmas and Halloween decorations. The neighborhood is gorgeous, and I can literally walk to the clubhouse and play a round of golf. The cul-de-sac we live on is dominated by currently serving or retired military families. Everyone was extremely welcoming at the Homeowners Association, and the neighbors were all friendly. Well, at least for the moment. Now, I've read about neighbor horror stories. I've seen them on television. I never, in a million years, thought I would live next to them. I am a gunfighter by trade, but believe it or not, I don't like war. I like my job, but I don't enjoy the carnage of war. I'm a realist though. I would totally cast my ballot for world peace, but I know it only takes one butthole to ruin it for everyone. My immediate neighbors became those buttholes. Enter the entitled parents, Kevin and Karen. They seemed nice at first. They were both really helpful, especially Kevin. Kevin had served in the Air Force, and Karen was a stay-at-home mother. They enlightened me regarding the neighborhood, the quality of the area schools, and told me the tips and tricks to avoid any hassle with the HOA. Freaking great, right? Enter coronavirus, COVID-19, zombie apocalypse. The onset of COVID-19 forced the school district to cancel the remainder of the school year, so the boys didn't turn into zombies. However, the mass hysteria allowed my humanoids to become semi-professional Fortnite gamers who smelled like bullfunk and survived on soda and zebra cakes. They were quickly becoming chubby bunnies. I, being neighborly, informed Kevin and Karen that I would be in the market for a portable basketball hoop to combat childhood obesity and type 2 diabetes. Side note, I remember everything. It can be quite literally a matter of life or death in my occupation, so I remember things vividly. So I go round to Karen's house. Pleasantries, some other words. I'm thinking about getting a basketball hoop for the boys, I say. That's great, says Karen. It's so good to have young children in the neighborhood again. Yeah, but you know you can't put it in the street, right? Says Kevin. It's against HOA rules. Kevin is a rules guy. Ah, well aware. I'll be putting it on the back pad. That's great. If the ball ever goes over the fence, just tell them to come and get it. Awesome. It was a positive interaction and they had no issue. Onwards to Walmart's. Now, my children are well behaved. They may act like idiots to each other and inside the house, but they're both kind and courteous to others. Despite Karen's instructions, I told them to knock on the door if the ball ever goes over the fence. So they did. First bounce over. I hear a knock 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 at my door. It's Kevin. Hey Kevin, how can I help you? Now Kevin was annoyed. The ball went over the fence. Ah, did the boys knock and ask to get it? Yes, I just wanted to let you know. I spoke to my wife afterwards. That was odd, was all I could think. Is the guy gonna let me know each time the ball goes over the fence? Maybe I should knock on his door. Hey, Kevin, just wanted to let you know that your car is parked in the driveway. This process quickly became a routine for Kevin. Kevin became a self-licking ice cream cone. Kevin came over 6 times over the course of about 3 months. My wife began keeping tallies because it was odd, but somewhat comical. Then stuff started to get real. Cake, my youngest child, came running in the house scared. He had tears in his eyes and was continually reiterating, "I didn't do anything wrong." Nobody has accused me of being world's best dad, so I was wondering if he did in fact do something wrong. I forgo waterboarding Cake this time and ask what he's talking about. Cake stated, "Karen is recording me." Wait, what? I look outside and sure as heck, I see Karen at the fence pointing her cell phone at me as if it was a loaded gun. I think, well, f my tits, because I know my wife is going to lose her head. And she did. My wife is dainty, but she quickly turned into a 4'11" Muhammad Ali. Man, it took every frickin' ounce of verbal reasoning for me to stop her from physically rearranging Karen's face meat. In addition to remembering things for work, I have to be well read regarding the laws that govern me as an American, and the local laws. I knew Karen's tactic to scare and record Cake was immoral and unethical, but it was perfectly legal. This didn't sit well with my wife though. I reminded my wife that I have a doctorate in revenge from university. F you, and this would not go unanswered. I can be a prick too, but I am a methodical prick. I did my best to erect makeshift barriers as a temporary solution. It wasn't perfect, but at least it showed that we were doing everything in our power to prevent bulls from going over the fence. I also submitted plans for a permanent structure to the HOA. I was going to build a hanging herb garden wall, but it required approval before construction could start. The typical approval timeline was 2 weeks, but in addition to pooping on Earth, COVID-19 also pooped on the approval process. I was in limbo. Now, tragically, another basketball fell victim to the senseless violence. It was the 9th basketball in approximately 8 months. The kids were terrified to ask for it back, and it wasn't even worth the hassle anymore. That didn't stop Kevin though. 9th bounce over. Knock, knock, knock. Hey, is your husband home? My wife answered. Yes, but he's injured his back. How can I help you? Get him, please. I should mention that Kevin is outwardly sexist and is not a fan of colours. Kevin, my husband can't even walk right now. How can I help you? The basketball went over the fence again and it needs to stop. They need to stop playing basketball. He was now telling my wife how to parent. Good luck, buddy. I'm sorry the ball went over the fence. We continue to tell the children to be careful, but I'm not going to tell them they can't play basketball in their own yard. You'll tell your boys to stop playing. If the ball comes over the fence again, we are calling the cops. Tell your boys to stay out of our yard. They're trespassing. If you want to call the cops, then you go ahead and do it. However, the boys do not go in your yard at all anymore. I was losing my mind in the bedroom. I could hear the conversation, but I physically couldn't make the front door. I managed to slide off the bed though and began my army crawl to the door, but I was late. My wife was fuming and I was angry and pathetically crawling on the floor. Yay, back injuries. We had no intention of starting a war, but the boys were doing nothing wrong. We'd informed Kevin we were getting a hoop and they had zero issues with it. What the frick was going on? 10th bounce over. The cops are called. The OP City Police Department sent 2 cruisers. The children may be 11 and 15, but all be danged if they don't go down without a fight. 1 cruiser was not going to suffice. You better send 2 for my miscreants. I just sat in my garage man cave and watched it all play out. The cops go to the neighbor's house first. They're there for more than an hour, and I can only assume we're being painted as horrible neighbors. Oh well. It's now pitch dark outside, and I was startled by the time an officer approaches. Officer John Kimball comes up to me. Hello, sir? Holy frick, you scared the poop out of me. Sorry, hi. I'm Officer Kimball with OP City PD. How are you doing this evening? Typically, I'd say fine, but I don't typically have a cop in my garage. Yeah, I understand. Look, the reason we're here is because the neighbors called out about trespassing. Now, they said nobody went in their yard today, but they want you to understand they will press charges next time. I was baffled. I did my best to maintain my composure, but I'm certain my face was screaming, "Are you freaking serious?" Officer Kimball then pointed at his body camera and mouthed, "Recording," and then gave me a thumbs up gesture. I immediately seized the opportunity to F with him. Sorry, it's in my nature. Hey, officer, do you want another beer? You can't just drink one. The officer starts laughing. What? I didn't have a beer with you. I'm only kidding. And look, we're fully aware of their intent to press charges. I'll be sure to do my best to prepare my boys for the rigors of prison life too. I think jail will be good for them too. Maybe even toughen them up a bit. Okay, sir, I just want to ensure that you are aware. Ideally, we'd like to see neighbors talk things like this out and not call the cops, but unfortunately, this is what it's come to. I just want to ensure you are aware. Tracking. You have a good evening, sir. Thanks. Officer Kimball then walked back to his patrol car. He didn't leave though. I assume he was just finishing mundane paperwork, but he was there for at least 20 minutes. Then, much to my surprise, he returned and was a completely different officer. Hey man, you back for that beer? No, sorry man, I've got to play the game for the body cam. I hear you. I occasionally wear one at work, but it only cuts back on my cussing. People still get shots. Oh, you are me? Yep. Cool. What do you do? Shoot first, shoot often, and have my story straight before the cops arrive. Oh, I figure as much after looking at all your stuff here. Look, I just wanted to talk to you without the camera. They really seem eager to press charges if your children are caught in their yard. Yeah, my wife and I have concluded that. Oh, honestly, that lady is batshit crazy. My God, she demanded we arrest your children tonight. Wait, tonight? Yes, she said they trespassed before and she wanted to press charges now. Oh my, I'm sorry you've got to deal with this, brother. I really am. I can assure you that they've never gone in their yard without permission. Not once. They are terrified of her. She taunts them from the other side of the fence and recalls them. Seriously, they're scared of her. We now chalk the balls up as a loss. Oh, I believe you. There's something not right with that lady. She said the basketball wakes her son up and she will not hesitate to press charges. I told her we'd do our duty, but I don't think the magistrate will not view the situation kindly if we arrest 2 children for playing basketball. She clearly doesn't care though. Look, I just wanted to chat with you, and without the body cam, I can't exactly call her crazy while it's running. The officer stayed for another hour. He was impressed with the collection of war memorabilia and the setup of my garage man cave. He was specifically intrigued with my Nintendo and working copy of Mike Tyson Punch-Out, among other classics. Yes, it's certainly freaking cool, but I'll be honest, it's got little to do with the story. But then, poop meets fan. My wife was mowing the grass, and I was currently doing stuff I never thought would be a priority of mine. Planting a new flower bed. Kevin and Karen had just returned from another Chick-fil-A run. Then the unthinkable happened. Kevin exited the car and immediately approached me. And he was angry. Your boys went into my yard and got a ball today. They may think we didn't notice, but we did. You need to tell those boys to stay out of my yard, or wait a freaking minute. I don't tolerate people who lie, cheat, or steal, and you are lying right now. No, your boys we were at an all-day soccer tournament in a different state. We've only been home for a couple of hours. They've not played any basketball since we've been home. You're lying. Well, we're sick of them getting balls from our yard without permission. Look, Kevin, I get it. However, you failed to recall when your wife said the boys were more than welcome to go in the yard, and I didn't even get to finish when I heard the screech of Karen. Now look, I know my writing style is different to say the least. I wish I was better. I do not have the words to accurately articulate the sound Karen made, but I'll do my best. It was like the Tyrannosaurus from Jurassic Park making love to a nuclear explosion during a tornado, but way freaking louder. The only thing that honestly makes this worse, and I freaking kid you not, is that she is a dead ringer for Carol Baskin from Tiger King. Not maybe a little, but more, holy frick, Carol Baskin is your neighbor type of resemblance. I never said that. I would never say that. She screamed at the top of her lungs mere inches from my face. I could smell the Meow Mix bellow from her scream factory. Meanwhile, Kevin pulled a frickin' Houdini and vanished. Kevin is a passive-aggressive butthole, and direct confrontation scares him off. Yes, you did, I reply. I never said that. You're wrong. Whatever, it's not even worth it. I'm so sick of your heathens going in my yard. Your heathens better not go in my yard again, or I will have them arrested. I know the law. The I know the law statement really rubbed me wrong. I was about to open my mouth and respond, but my wife was on her like stink on poop, which led me to believe Karen is louder than a lawnmower. My wife was still seething about Karen recording the kids. They don't go in your yard and they're good children. They are not heathens. You better stop recording my children. Oh, shut up. You guys are white trash. Your children play in the street and run around the neighborhood like criminals. They broke my mulch too. Yes, she said they broke the mulch. Everybody knows you're trash. Just stupid white trash. I'm now thinking, oh frick, and I'm semi-worried about Karen's future health as an active participant of living humans. I think my wife wanted to expire Karen's shelf life. Excuse me? My children never play in the streets. You're recording them? Oh, just shut up. You're stupid. You're just plain stupid. I can record them if I want. No wonder you don't have jobs. I have 3 advanced degrees. We're working from home. When you are, you're trashy and stupid, and both your children are stupid. I had enough. There was no point in arguing at all. Mark Twain stated, never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Now, Mark is correct, and Karen was trying to drag us down. Now, I don't know why, but I remember something that Kevin discussed with me when we first moved in. The frickin' trees. They have a large maple tree, and they have a juniper tree. Kevin always told me they were in the process of contracting a company to crown and lift the maple tree. Furthermore, they were going to get the juniper tree off my fence. Now guys, I know the law too. I can legally trim anything that goes over my property line. Now, all those pointless conversations were making sense. It was my time to join this exciting game called pettiness. Karen, I say, you have until Sunday to get your juniper off my fence. Oh, shut up. I told you we were going to get it handled this fall. It's June. You have until Sunday. Or what? I allow my wife to rejoin the conversation, and I retreat to the garage. There, I grab my clippers and prune a good couple of inches off the juniper tree and lay them at her feet. Cue T-Rex frickin' a volcano voice. What the heck do you think you're doing? I told you it will be done this fall. You have until Saturday now. You're dumb too. Just like your wife, aren't you? My intelligence may have been debatable, but I suppose it was time to repeat the process. I now return with about 2 feet of tree and place it at her feet. I am like Momo lady. You have until Friday, I say. You better not touch my tree again. I'll call the cops and have you thrown in jail tonight. You're so dumb, aren't you? Now I see where your children get it from. I know the law too, Karen. I'll be back in a minute with some more of your juniper tree. Kevin! 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 I again return to the tree. I now have another 2 feet of juniper tree to place at her feet. The more she screams, the smaller her tree becomes. It was an enjoyable game of cause and effect. Meanwhile, I see Kevin and Kevin Jr. running like Usain Bolt to secure their tree with toe straps. I hope you're happy. You're terrible people. You're both terrible parents and your children are heathens. I'm sick of ball bouncing and waking my son up too. You people need to move. You're just horrible parents. Horrible. Now screaming louder. Horrible parents. Guys, I had enough. I was at critical mass. I was going to explode. Karen continued to yell at my wife and I was zoning out. It was comical to watch Kevin and Kevin Jr. secure the tree to their porch in order to get it off the fence. Once complete, they quickly made their way back to the one-sided screaming party. Horrible parents, look what they did with my poor tree. I think we should call the cops, dear. Horrible parents, I feel sorry for your kids and I'll just shut the frick up. I raked up 21 bags of leaves this past fall. 21. Funny because we don't have a tree in our backyard. I pulled an additional bag's worth of leaves and branches from my gutter. Not from my tree either, it was from your tree. You know what, Kevin? I didn't complain. I didn't knock on your door and bitch. Yeah? And? We live in a suburbia. This stuff happens. They are kids. Kids freaking play outside. I don't want the ball in your yard either. You accuse them of being in your yard. You also accuse them of breaking mulch. How in the frick do you break mulch? Are you freaking serious? Really? Yes, really. Maybe you should learn how to parent your horrible children. At this point, I just freaking lost it. Wait for the surprise. You know what? That's the last time you question me about my parenting. My children are going to grow up and be productive members of our society. I find it comical that you have the audacity to question my parenting, seeing how you have a, wait for it, 49-year-old son living at your house for the past 9 years. I assume it was because of the divorce and the bankruptcy he filed 9 years ago. My children are waking your child up. Your child is a jobless 49-year-old man living at home with mum and dad. Is he working on a startup? Prestige Worldwide maybe? Boats and hoes? At this point, Karen was freaking baffled. How do you know any of that? Do you go snooping through our mail too? I'm good at what I do, and I found everything online. I know you are 69 and lost your license due to reckless endangerment charge in 2017. I know Kevin Jr. has 5 different moving violations and 1 DUI. I also know he was fired from his grounds crew job with the HOA. I know your husband is 72 and wears the same frickin' shirt every day, so I can only assume that laundry is not a priority. I know your phone numbers and email accounts. I know a lot of stuff about you. Your child is 49 and lives at home. Maybe you should be more worried about your parenting and less about mine. We can have a civil relationship or we can have a war. Just remember this though, I'm going to frickin' outlive you. They then stormed back into their house. They were not happy or impressed with my ability to figure stuff out. It wasn't over for me though. they fricked with the wrong F-head. They were unaware of actions I took to keep the peace. For example, I never let the boys play basketball while they were outside eating dinner. I didn't let them play before 9 or after 7. I tried, but they would blare country music and enjoy the gorgeous weather and eat a meal. I never complained about Garth Brooks on volume 100 while I watched the national news. I was teleworking, and I took f***ing up as a part-time job now. I have wrestled since I was 4 years old. I was never much of a basketball guy. I am now though. Karen and Kevin had just sat down to enjoy their meal. I don't have to spy either. I can easily see them out my French doors as I watch the news. I patiently waited for the slot speed F-heads to get their outside dinner setting perfectly situated. I could hear Tim McGraw playing when I opened my French doors. I like music too, so I figured I'd get my groove and play basketball. I say, Alexa, play Ain't Sh by Dr. Dre. Playing Bleep and Bleep by Dr. Dre. Alexa, volume 10. I have a new fondness for rap music and the game of basketball. This didn't stop Karen from recording my heathens on a daily basis. Look, I know what I was about to do was petty, but I had 0 Fs to give at that point. I had one last FU, my final card to play, an Uno reverse card of sorts. My neighbours across the streets and my family have bonded. He had a tree removed last week, and I had an epiphany. How much would it cost to trim a large maple tree that overhangs my property? I'm not talking a couple of branches either, but more like 1/2 of a more than 100-foot tree. I approached the tree removal company and offered them a sizable chunk of change and informed them of my delicate problem. They said, any friend of your neighbour is a friend of ours. Pro bono. They moved their large equipment over to my backyard and take their time getting ready. Guess who came running out of the house? No, not Brad Pitt. Frick, get your stuff together, reader. Karen and Kevin come running out. Hey, buddy, said Kevin. He went with buddy, not F-head, not horrible parents. Buddy, what can I do for you? What are they doing here? Oh, them? I point at the guys. Yeah, what are they doing here? Oh, well, they're just gonna go and trim the tree. Just trim? Yep, just a little trim. You know that tree was a gift from our daughter, right? Says Karen. We don't want anything drastic. It's been with us for over 40 years now. Yeah, it was a gift from our daughter. How much are you thinking of trimming? Well, just so you're aware, you understand that I can legally trim anything that overhangs my property. I've got approval from my lawyer and the HOA to trim it. Now, frankly, I care as much about your tree as you do my children's privacy. I could freaking care less. Well, how much are you talking about trimming then? My property line is here, I point, and it extends up, I point up, to space. I'm gonna trim every single branch that encroaches my property. So probably about 1/3 of your tree. It's gonna look really freaking funny when I'm done. Oh well. Karen started to cry. It was a really ugly cry. There was no more rage left in her. She was defeated. Kevin was defeated as well. Now, this was not my desire. Don't get me wrong, I don't care if she cried, but it was not my intent. Or, you can stop recording my frickin' children. Karen looked like snot-nosed Carol Baskin. If I stop recording? Look, we don't have to like each other, because I certainly don't frickin' like you guys. My boys never go in your yard, ever. I don't even care if you keep the basketballs, but I'll be danged if you frickin' record them ever again. If you do, I'll cut your tree down without warning. Now, Kevin is still angry, but says, thanks, bud. No worries, friend. I'm just trying to be neighborly. Just remember, I am dead serious about the tree, and I'm pretty certain I will outlive you. Now look, guys, I know I'm a prick. I know we're both in the wrong at times. I draw the line, though, when a 69-year-old woman sees fit to torment my kids. We've only had one problem since these events occurred. Kevin's junior's car sat in the same spot for 9 months. I've submitted over 20 home improvement requests to the HOA, and I'm now friends with the wonderful ladies that work there. They periodically inspect neighborhoods and noticed the registration on Junior's vehicle was 2 years outdated, and they had it towed. Karen accused me of having it towed. We had another colourful conversation, but it ended there. Kevin Jr. is still jobless to this day. I assume he's managed to erect a bunk bed in his childhood bedroom. He has so much more room for activities. Just make sure you don't touch his drum sets. And there we go. That is the end of that absolute beaut of a story. I've got to say, first of all, I don't know why OP thinks his writing is bad. It's phenomenal. I loved reading that. It was so easy to read. It flowed so well. The story was great. The twist at the end as well. A 49-year-old kid still living at home, and that's the person that you're complaining about. Oh, amazing. Loved every second. Great story. Hope you guys enjoyed it too. You know, personally, I've always thought about this, right? What if you buy a house and it just turns out, unluckily, that your neighbors are just horrific people, like in this story? There's nothing you can do. You own your house, they own their house. You've just got to live with each other. It must be incredibly tiring to have to go through an entire ordeal like this and deal with people like Karen, Kevin, and their son, I guess. But wow, the way you guys went about it, amazing. OP, I love you. I love your wife. I love your kids even. Not in a weird way, but they seem like good guys. You know, very polite, respectful, good at basketball as well. Future in the NBA, perhaps. But yeah, in general, all I can say is that every word of this was just brilliant. Thoroughly enjoyed reading it. Hope you guys did too. As I said in the intro, I'm on a mission to bring you lot the best quality stories from the internet. And I think with this one, I mean, let me know down in the comments if you agree. I've done so. Drop a like on the video if you agree with that. And there you have it. Those were the top 10 most upvoted stories of the past month, July 2022. Of course, with some of my other favorites sprinkled in there. Really hope you did enjoy it. And if you did, and you want to see more from me right away, if you want even more Entitled Parents content, I've left a selection of videos on screen for you to go and browse. They're equally as long as this one, and some are much longer. I mean, this one's over 10 hours. That's also linked down in the description. Click that if you want a lifetime of enjoyment.